Hello guys, and welcome back to the HistSleep channel. Tonight, we are going to step away from the noise of the modern world and enter a landscape of frost, flickering candlelight, and the quiet ambition of a young girl who would one day change the map of the world. We are traveling back to the mid-18th century, to a journey that stretched across the snowy plains of Europe, a journey that was as much about the soul as it was about the miles traveled. Before we begin our journey into the early life of the woman the world would come to know as Catherine, I would love it if you could take a moment to subscribe to this channel and give this video a like. It truly helps these stories find their way to those who are looking for a moment of peace. And I always find myself wondering, where in the world are you tonight? Are you listening as the snow falls outside your window, or perhaps under the hum of a ceiling fan in the heat? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one of them, and your presence here truly makes this a shared experience. Now, let the weight of the day settle into the mattress beneath you. Take a deep breath. And let's travel to the year 1744. The air in northern Germany, in the small principality of Anhalt-Zerbst, was biting and crisp. Imagine a young girl, only 14 years old, named Sophie Friederich August. She is sitting in a heavy, wooden carriage, draped in thick furs that smell of cedar and old winter. Beside her is her mother, Johanna, a woman whose own ambitions were far larger than the tiny territory they were leaving behind. But Sophie, she is quiet. The sound of the carriage wheels on the frozen earth is a steady, rhythmic thrum. Clack, 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 clack. It is a sound that will follow her for weeks. They are moving east. Moving toward a destiny that Sophie cannot yet fully grasp, but which she feels in the coldness of the door handle and the vastness of the darkening horizon. As the carriage crosses the border into the Russian Empire, the landscape begins to change. The forests of pine and birch become denser, more ancient. The trees stand like tall, silent sentinels draped in white shrouds of snow. Everything is silent, save for the occasional jingle of the horse's harness, and the rhythmic breathing of the animals in the cold air, their breath turning into plumes of silver mist. Sophie looks out the window. She is leaving behind the familiar comforts of her childhood, her dolls, her French tutors, the predictable gardens of her home. Ahead of her lies a court she has only heard of in whispers, a court of unimaginable wealth and terrifying complexity. The journey to Moscow is not a fast one. It is a slow, methodical crawl through a world of white. At night, they stop at small, wooden post stations, where the scent of wood smoke and hot tea fills the cramped rooms. Sophie lies awake on these nights, listening to the wind howl around the eaves of the buildings. She is a girl of logic, a girl of books, and she is already beginning to teach herself. In the dim light of a flickering candle, she practices her Russian. She whispers the strange, guttural words to herself over and over, until her tongue feels heavy. Ochin priyatno. Zdravstvuyte. She knows that if she is to survive in this new world, she must become a part of it. She must shed the German Sophie, and begin the slow, deliberate process of becoming the Russian Ekaterina. Imagine the sheer scale of the Russian winter. It is a silence that feels heavy, almost physical. As the carriage moves deeper into the heart of the empire, the sky turns a deep, bruised purple at twilight. The stars appear, sharper and brighter than they ever seemed in Germany, like diamonds scattered on a bed of black velvet. Sophie watches them. She thinks about the Empress Elizabeth, the woman who has summoned her. Elizabeth, a figure of legend, who seized the throne in a coup, who wears gowns of gold and controls the lives of millions. Sophie is small, she is a minor princess, but as she watches those cold, distant stars, a quiet resolve is forming within her. She is not just a bride being delivered like a parcel. She is an observer, a student of power. The carriage reaches the outskirts of the city. The silence of the forest is replaced by the distant tolling of church bells. Low, sonorous, heavy bells that vibrate in the very air. The smell changes, it is now the scent of incense, of roasting meats, and the pervasive, damp smell of a city built on the edge of the wilderness. When Sophie finally steps out of the carriage, her legs are stiff from the weeks of travel. The ground beneath her feet is Russian soil. It is hard, frozen, and unforgiving. But as she looks up at the towering spires of the Kremlin, she doesn't feel fear. She feels a strange, calm curiosity. She is presented to the Empress Elizabeth. The room is a blur of candlelight and shimmering silk. The warmth of the palace is overwhelming after the weeks of cold. Sophie bows low, her forehead almost touching the polished floor. When she rises, she sees her future husband, the Grand Duke Peter. He is thin, pale, and restless. He looks at her not with love, but with the boredom of a boy who would rather be playing with his toy soldiers. Sophie realizes in that moment, in the quiet space between the music and the chatter of the courtiers, that she is alone. Her mother is busy networking. Her husband is uninterested. The Empress is a mercurial goddess. And so, Sophie turns inward. She decides, in the stillness of her first night in the palace, that she will be the most Russian person in the room. She stays up late, long after the candles have burned down to stubs, sitting by the window and watching the moonlight play across the frozen river. She reads. She studies. She listens to the footsteps of the guards in the hallway, the clink of their sabers, the low murmur of their voices. She is no longer just Sophie. She is the apprentice of an empire. She learns the subtle art of the courtly smile, the way to tilt her head to show deference, the way to use silence as a shield. The girl who arrived in the fur-lined carriage is slowly, piece by piece, being replaced. The transition is not sudden. It is like the melting of the ice in spring, a slow, inevitable shift. She adopts the Orthodox faith, she embraces the Russian language, she begins to understand the deep, soulful melancholy of the Russian people. And in doing so, she begins to build the foundation for a rule that will span decades. But for now, she is just a girl in a large, cold palace, listening to the wind. The journey is over, but the story, the real story of the woman who would rule the East, is only just beginning. Close your eyes now, and imagine that carriage disappearing back into the snowy mist of history. The sound of the horses, fading into the silence of the night. You are safe. You are warm. And the Empress is watching over the quiet halls of time. Now, as we settle deeper into the stillness of the night, let your mind drift back to the echoing hallways of the Winter Palace. The year is 1745. The young girl once known as Sophie is now the Grand Duchess Catherine. She has been married to the heir of the Russian throne, Grand Duke Peter, but the fairy tale that many imagine is nowhere to be found in these cold, marble rooms. Take a slow, deep breath. Feel the weight of the blankets as we enter a period of Catherine's life defined by a strange, heavy silence. A silence that lasted nearly a decade. To understand the woman Catherine would become, we must first understand the shadow she lived under. Her husband, Peter, was a man-child. While the empire outside the palace walls moved with the tectonic weight of history, inside their private apartments, time seemed to stand still in a state of arrested childhood. Imagine the scene. It is 2 o'clock in the morning. The rest of the palace is asleep, the candles have burned down to glowing stubs. But in the Grand Duke's bedroom, there is the sound of marching. Not the marching of real men, but the clicking of thousands of tiny lead soldiers. Peter spent his nights arranging these figurines on the bedspread, or hanging toy rats from tiny gallows for treason. Beside him sat Catherine, a young woman of immense intellect, a woman who hungered for conversation, for art, for the pulse of the Enlightenment. But instead, she was a prisoner of his games. She was expected to sit there, often for hours, watching him play. Close your eyes, and hear the rhythmic clack-clack-clack of the metal soldiers. The isolation Catherine felt was physical. She was surrounded by courtiers, by ladies-in-waiting, by the watchful, eagle eyes of the Empress Elizabeth, and yet, she was utterly alone. She later wrote in her memoirs that she felt like a forgotten piece of furniture in a vast, cold house. But it was in this shadow, in this long, lonely decade, that the true Catherine began to forge herself. Since she had no companion in her husband, she turned to the companions that never fail a curious mind. Her books. She began with novels, but quickly grew bored of fluff. She moved on to the works of Tacitus, to the histories of Rome, to the deep, complex philosophies of Montesquieu and Voltaire. Imagine her sitting by a frosted window, the pale light of a Russian winter day barely illuminating the pages. She is wrapped in a heavy silk shawl, her fingers slightly blue from the chill of the palace. As she reads, she isn't just absorbing facts. She is constructing a blueprint. She is comparing the Roman Republic to the Russian autocracy. She is thinking about how a ruler can be loved rather than feared. Every night that Peter spent playing with his toys, Catherine spent building an empire in her mind. She was teaching herself how to be a sovereign, while the man who was supposed to be king was still a child. The American audience often appreciates the underdog story, the idea of a self-made person. And Catherine, in these years, was the ultimate self-made intellectual. She taught herself the Russian language with such ferocity that she would sit up at night, barefoot on the cold floor, repeating verbs until her throat was sore. Why barefoot? Because she believed the cold would keep her awake, would sharpen her focus. She wanted to speak to the Russian people in their own tongue, with their own soul, something Peter refused to do. Peter obsessed over the Prussian army. He dressed in foreign uniforms, he spoke German, he openly mocked the Russian Orthodox Church. He was a shadow that refused to touch the ground he stood on. But Catherine, she was different. She leaned into the shadow. She embraced the Russian winter. She fasted during the holy days. She stood for hours in the incense-filled cathedrals, her eyes fixed on the icons, showing the people that she belonged to them. Can you hear the low, resonant chanting of the monks? The smell of beeswax and ancient wood? In the public eye, she was the perfect, pious Grand Duchess. But in the private shadow of her marriage, she was a woman living a double life. Her relationship with the Empress Elizabeth was equally fraught. Elizabeth was a woman of immense power and terrifying moods. She could be a mother figure one moment, and a jailer the next. She guarded Catherine's every move. Her letters were intercepted. Her friends were sent away if they became too close. The palace was a gilded cage, and the shadow of the Empress was even longer than the shadow of her husband. But Catherine learned the most valuable lesson a ruler can learn, the art of waiting. Patience is a quiet, steady rhythm. It is the sound of a clock ticking in a room where no one speaks. Tick, tick, tick. She learned to smile when she was insulted. She learned to stay silent when she was angry. She learned that power is not just about shouting orders, it is about being the last person left standing. As the years stretched on, the shadow of the Grand Duke became a source of strength for her. Because he was so weak, she had to be strong. Because he was so foolish, she had to be wise. She spent her 20s in a state of constant, quiet preparation. She was the apprentice who had already mastered the trade, waiting for the master to falter. Think about the endurance it takes to live in a marriage where there is no intimacy, no shared dreams, for nearly 10 years. To wake up every morning in a palace that feels like a tomb, and still choose to find a reason to study, to grow, to plan. The American spirit often finds resonance in that kind of grit. Catherine was not born great. She was forged great in the cold, dark corners of a marriage that failed her. Eventually, the shadow began to flicker. The Empress Elizabeth's health began to fail. The court began to realize that the childlike Peter would soon be the most powerful man in the world, and they were afraid. In that fear, they began to look at Catherine. They saw the woman who stayed up late reading. They saw the woman who knew the names of the guards. They saw the woman who had become more Russian than the Russians themselves. She was no longer just the German princess who arrived in a carriage. She was the silent force behind the throne. Now, let the image of the Winter Palace fade for a moment. Imagine the candles going out, one by one. The clicking of the toy soldiers has stopped. Peter is asleep, dreaming of Prussian parades. But Catherine is still awake. She is standing at the window, looking out at the Neva River, watching the ice break apart as spring approaches. The shadow is starting to retreat. The sun is beginning to peek over the edge of the world. Your breathing is slow now. Your mind is calm. The lessons of Catherine's patience are settling into your heart. There is a time for action, but there is also a time for the quiet, steady work of the soul. You are safe in the stillness of the present. The history of the past is just a soft murmur in the wind. Let the weight of the stories carry you into a deep, dreamless, restful sleep. The Grand Duchess is quiet now. The books are closed. The Empire is waiting. Let the world outside your door fall away now. Imagine the heavy, velvet curtains of the palace being drawn shut against the biting Russian wind. We have spent time in the cold shadow of Catherine's marriage, but now the atmosphere begins to change. The air feels a little warmer, the light of the candles a little softer. We are entering the year 1752. After 8 long years of isolation, the young Grand Duchess is about to experience the first spark of a fire that would define her life, the fire of human connection. Take a deep, slow breath. Feel your shoulders drop as we step into the private galleries of the summer retreats. Enter Sergei Saltykov. Imagine Sergei as he moves through the court. He is a chamberlain, a man of the old Russian nobility. He is handsome, he is charming, and most importantly, he possesses the one thing Catherine has been starved of, the ability to listen. In a court built on gossip and artifice, Sergei speaks with a warmth that Catherine has never known from her husband. For an American listener, this is the moment the protagonist finally finds an ally. But in the world of the Romanovs, an ally is a dangerous thing to have. At first, it begins with glances. A lingering look across a crowded ballroom. A brush of a hand as a book is passed from one person to another. Catherine is 23 years old now. She is in the prime of her life, her mind is sharp, her spirit is resilient, but her heart is a hollow space waiting to be filled. Sergei notices this. He sees the woman behind the title, the woman who spends her nights alone with her philosophies. Can you hear the soft rustle of silk as they walk together in the palace gardens? The gravel crunching gently under their feet? They talk about the things that matter. They talk about the future, about the soul, about the strange, beautiful burden of being alive. For the first time, Catherine isn't just a political pawn. She is a woman being seen. But there is a shadow even over this new light. The Empress Elizabeth is growing impatient. The Romanov line needs an heir, and the marriage between Catherine and Peter has remained, as the historians say, unconsummated. The Empress is a pragmatist. She begins to whisper in the ears of her advisors. She begins to look at Sergei Saltykov not with anger, but with a calculated, cold approval. Imagine the ethical weight of that moment. A young woman being encouraged by the state to find comfort elsewhere, simply to ensure the survival of a dynasty. Catherine is torn. She is a woman of high principles, a woman of logic. But she is also a woman who is tired of being alone. The spark becomes a flame in the summer of 1752. The setting is the Oranienbaum Palace, a place of sprawling gardens and quiet, hidden grottos. Away from the prying eyes of the main court. Catherine and Sergei find a rhythm of their own. It is a romance of whispers. It is the sound of a door clicking shut in the dead of night. It is the scent of lavender and rain-damp earth. Sergei is her first love. He is the one who teaches her that she is desirable, that her thoughts have value, that she is more than just a ghost in her husband's house. He is the first spark of her awakening. But in the boring history of it all, we must look at the quiet details. Think of the letters they exchanged. Not grand, dramatic declarations, but small notes tucked into the bindings of books. I will be by the fountain at midnight. The moon is bright tonight. I am thinking of you. Simple words that carry the weight of 1,000 dreams. As their connection deepens, the political machinery of Russia begins to grind into gear. In 1754, 2 years after they met, Catherine discovers she is pregnant. The palace falls into a different kind of silence. A silence of expectation. Was the child Peter's? Was the child Sergei's? The historians have debated this for centuries, but in the quiet of this story, perhaps the answer doesn't matter as much as the effect it had on Catherine. She was no longer just an observer of power. She was now the vessel of it. On a cold October day in 1754, the future Tsar Paul I is born. Imagine the scene in the birthing chamber. The heat of the room, the smell of medicinal herbs, the frantic energy of the midwives. And then, the baby is taken. Empress Elizabeth sweeps into the room, picks up the child, and carries him away to her own apartments. Catherine is left alone. Exhausted, bleeding, and abandoned. Even Sergei is gone, sent away on a diplomatic mission to Sweden, his role in the drama completed in the eyes of the state. This is the bittersweet reality of Catherine's first love. It was a spark that gave her a child, and a spark that gave her a sense of self, but it was a spark that was extinguished by the very empire she served. She lay in her bed for weeks, listening to the wind howl against the palace walls, realizing that in Russia, love is a luxury, but power is a necessity. She learned that Sergei was a man of his time, a man who could be moved like a piece on a chessboard. But she was the board itself. Close your eyes now and feel the stillness of that recovery room. The flickering candlelight, the sound of a single fountain outside, the distant tolling of a bell. Catherine is rising from her bed. She is thinner, paler, but her eyes are different now. They are harder. They are clearer. She has moved past the need for a husband, and she has moved past the simple, romantic dreams of a young girl. She understands now that if she wants a love that lasts, she must first become the master of her own fate. The first spark has faded, leaving behind a glowing ember of ambition. Your breath is deep and steady now. You are drifting on the tide of history. The palaces are quiet, the lovers have long since turned to dust, and the snow continues to fall over the vast, sleeping plains of Russia. You are safe. You are at peace. The fire is low in the hearth. The story is settling into the bones of the night. Let the quiet strength of Catherine's resilience fill your mind as you drift deeper and deeper into sleep. The spark has done its work. The woman is ready. The empire is calling. Take a long, deep breath and feel the air around you grow still. We are moving away from the heat of first love and the chaos of childbirth, and we are stepping into the immense, echoing quiet of the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. Imagine a building so vast that one could walk for miles without ever leaving its corridors. A building designed to showcase power, but which, for Catherine, became a labyrinth of profound loneliness. As you lie there, imagine the sound of your own footsteps on polished marble. Echo, echo, echo. The Winter Palace is a masterpiece of Baroque grandeur, but at 3 a.m, it is a wilderness of stone and shadow. Before we continue our walk through these silent halls, I want to remind you to settle your body into the most comfortable position possible. Let your hands rest loosely at your sides. Let the muscles in your face soften. We are here to witness the quiet years, the years where Catherine learned that a crown is often lined with the coldest of sorrows. The palace sits on the edge of the Neva River. In the winter, the river is a solid, jagged road of blue ice. The wind howls off the water, hitting the thick, stone walls of the palace with a sound like a low, mournful cello. Inside, the air is heavy with the scent of beeswax, expensive tobacco, and the dry, dusty smell of ancient tapestries that have hung in the same spot for decades. Catherine's private apartments were located in a wing that felt miles away from the heart of the court. After her son Paul was taken from her by the Empress Elizabeth, her rooms became a sanctuary and a prison. Imagine her sitting in a high-backed chair, a single candle flickering on the desk beside her. The flame is steady because the walls are so thick that not even the strongest Russian gale can make them shiver. She spends hours watching that flame. In the boring reality of palace life, there is a lot of waiting. Waiting for the Empress to summon her. Waiting for the Grand Duke to finish his drills. Waiting for a letter from home that will never truly understand her life here. Let's walk through her room together. To your left, there is a massive porcelain stove, reaching all the way to the gilded ceiling. It is covered in blue and white tiles, depicting scenes of Dutch windmills and quiet villages. If you press your hand against the tile, you can feel the radiating heat, a slow, pulsing warmth that is the only thing keeping the damp chill of the river at bay. To your right, bookshelves. Row upon row of leather-bound volumes. Catherine touches the spines as she passes. The rough texture of the calfskin, the cold hardness of the gold leaf lettering. These are her only true friends. She pulls down a volume of the encyclopedia. The paper is thick and creamy. It makes a satisfying, heavy thud when she lays it on the table. The loneliness of the winter palace is not a loud sadness. It is a slow, rhythmic, repetitive thing. It is the sound of the guards changing shifts in the courtyard below. The rhythmic clack, clack, clack of their muskets hitting the stone. It is the sound of the pendulum in the grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Each second is a heartbeat in a body of stone. Catherine often walks the galleries at night. Imagine the scale of these rooms. The Jordan staircase, with its white marble steps and gold-leafed balustrades. It is so large that a human being looks like a small, dark speck against the grandeur. She walks past the portraits of the Tsars who came before her. Peter the Great, with his piercing, restless eyes. Empress Anna, dark and formidable. Their eyes seem to follow her, judging her, wondering if this German girl has the iron in her blood to survive this place. She stops at a window. The glass is cold against her forehead. Outside. St. Petersburg is a city of ghosts. The street lamps are few and far between, flickering yellow dots in a sea of blue-black darkness. She thinks about the thousands of peasants and workers who died building this city on a swamp. Their bones are the foundation of these walls. The palace is built on sacrifice, and she realizes that she, too, is being sacrificed to the idea of Russia. The American audience understands the price of ambition, the long hours of solitude required to build something great. Catherine was building herself. In the silence, she practiced her posture. She would stand for an hour in front of a mirror, practicing the look of an empress. A slight tilt of the chin. A steady, unblinking gaze. A hand resting lightly on a table. She was becoming an actress in the grandest theater in the world. Sometimes, she would hear the distant sound of music from the other side of the palace. Elizabeth was holding a ball. The faint, ghostly sound of a harpsichord, the muffled vibration of hundreds of dancing feet. Catherine was not invited. She was kept in the shadows, a backup plan, a vessel that had already delivered its cargo. But the loneliness was where her power grew. In the absence of love, she found logic. In the absence of friends, she found philosophy. She began to write her own laws, drafting ideas for a Russia that was modern, fair, and enlightened. These documents, written in the dead of night, were the seeds of her future greatness. Imagine the ink drying on the page. The scratch of the quill, scritch, scritch, scritch. It is a small sound, but in the silence of the winter palace, it sounds like a revolution. The floors of the palace are made of exotic woods, inlaid in intricate patterns of stars and flowers. As she walks, the wood occasionally moans under her weight, a low, creaking sound that echoes down the long, dark vista of the enfilade. Each room leads into another, and another, and another, an endless chain of empty splendor. She thinks of her son, Paul. He is in a nursery at the other end of this massive complex. She is not allowed to see him without permission. She is a mother who cannot hold her child. The ache in her chest is as cold as the ice on the Neva. But she swallows the pain. She turns back to her books. She turns back to the stove. The Winter Palace is a teacher of stoicism. It teaches you that emotions are fleeting, but stone is permanent. Catherine decides to be like the stone. Your breathing is very slow now. Like the slow rise and fall of the tide against the palace embankments. The stories of the past are weaving into your own quiet space. You are safe from the cold. You are safe from the loneliness. Imagine the candles in Catherine's room finally burning out. The room is bathed in the silver light of the moon. The shadows of the bedpost stretch across the floor like the bars of a cell, but the door is not locked. It is her mind that is free. The palace is sleeping now. The Empress is asleep. The Grand Duke is asleep. The toy soldiers are silent in their boxes. And Catherine, she finally closes her eyes, the words of the philosophers echoing in her head like a lullaby. To rule is to be alone, she whispers to the dark. Let that thought carry you down into the deep, quiet waters of sleep. The marble is cold, but your bed is warm. The palace is vast, but you are tucked away in a place of perfect peace. Listen to the wind one last time. A low, humming vibration. It is the sound of history breathing. As the echoes of the lonely winter palace begin to fade into the background of your mind, I want you to imagine a change in the air. The biting chill of the Russian winter is still there, but inside the heart of the Grand Duchess, a new warmth is beginning to take root. The year is 1755. The isolation that Catherine has endured is about to be shattered, not by a soldier, and not by a revolutionary, but by a man of grace, elegance, and deep, poetic intelligence. Take a very slow, deep breath. Feel your body sinking further into your mattress. We are entering a chapter of soft whispers, of late-night letters, and of a love that was as much about the mind as it was about the heart. Enter Stanisław.
Aww.
Poniatowski. Stanisław.
Aww.
Arrives in St. Petersburg as part of the British diplomatic mission. He is a Polish nobleman, young, handsome, and refined in a way the Russian court has rarely seen. For an American listener, think of Stanisław
Aww.
as the ultimate intellectual partner. He is not interested in toy soldiers, and he is not interested in the crude power plays of the barracks. He is a man who speaks the language of art, of French philosophy, and of the soul. Imagine the first time their eyes meet. It is at a masked ball, a whirlwind of silk and lace. In the dim, flickering light of 5,000 candles, Stanisław
Aww.
sees a woman who is far more than just a Grand Duchess. He sees a genius hiding in plain sight. Catherine, for her part, sees a man who doesn't look through her, but at her. Close your eyes and hear the music of the ballroom. The soft, rhythmic scratching of violins, the hum of 100 quiet conversations, and the rhythmic swish-swish of silk gowns against the polished floor. In the middle of this crowded room, they find a way to be alone. Their romance is a masterpiece of subtlety. In the HistoryForSleep style, we focus on the quietest details. The way Stanisław
Aww.
would leave a specific flower in a vase that only Catherine would notice. The way they would sit at opposite ends of a dinner table, but communicate entirely through the slight movement of their fans or the direction of their gaze. Stanisław
Aww.
is the one who truly introduces Catherine to the heights of the Enlightenment. They spend hours, late into the night, discussing the works of the great thinkers. Imagine them in a small, private library. The smell of old paper and leather is strong here. Outside, the snow is falling in thick, heavy flakes, silencing the world. Inside, there is only the sound of a crackling fire, and the low, steady murmur of their voices. What is the nature of justice, he might ask. And Catherine, leaning forward in the amber glow of the fire, would answer with a precision that took his breath away. This was the boring history of their love. It wasn't built on scandals or shouting matches. It was built on the slow, steady accumulation of shared thoughts. They were two minds merging in a world that only valued bloodlines and land. For Catherine, Stanisel
Aww.
was a mirror. He reflected back to her the image of the woman she wanted to be, an enlightened ruler, a patron of the arts, a philosopher queen. He gave her the confidence that she had lost during the years of being ignored by her husband and controlled by the Empress. Can you hear the sound of a quill moving across parchment? Scritch, scritch, scritch. They wrote to each other constantly. Even when they were in the same palace, they exchanged notes. Imagine the texture of the paper, the way the ink looked as it dried under the light of a single lamp. These letters were the lifeblood of their relationship. My heart is a clock that only ticks when you are near, Stanisel
Aww.
once wrote. It is a slow, rhythmic sentiment. Tick, tick, tick. But as with all things in the Romanov court, the shadow of politics never truly disappears. Stanisel
Aww.
was a foreigner. He was a diplomat. And Catherine was still the wife of the heir to the throne. Their love had to exist in the spaces between the rules. It had to be a secret carried in the folds of a cloak, or a message whispered behind a hand. Imagine the tension of a midnight meeting. Catherine walking down a long, dark corridor, her heart beating in time with her footsteps. Thump, thump, thump. Every shadow looks like a spy. Every creak of the floorboards sounds like a betrayal. But when she reaches the door and sees the silhouette of Stanisel
Aww.
waiting by the window, the fear vanishes. They stand together, looking out at the frozen Neva. The moonlight reflects off the ice, creating a landscape that looks like it is made of silver and diamonds. It is a beautiful, cold, and fragile world. Stanisel
Aww.
was more than just a lover. He was a dream of a different kind of life. A life where Catherine could be a woman first and a duchess second. But the American audience knows that Catherine's destiny was not one of simple domestic happiness. She was meant for the crown. In 1758, the reality of the court began to close in on them. Politics shifted. The British mission was leaving. Stanisel
Aww.
was recalled to Poland. Imagine the final.
Goodbye.
There are no dramatic tears. There is only a long, heavy silence. They stand in the same library where they shared so many thoughts. The fire is low, just a pile of glowing orange embers. He takes her hand. The skin is warm, the pulse is steady. I will never forget the woman who reads by the window, he says. And then, he is gone. The sound of his carriage leaving the courtyard is the only sound in the night. Clack, 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 clack. The rhythm of departure. Catherine stands at the window, watching the lanterns of the carriage disappear into the mist, until there is nothing left but the white darkness of the Russian winter. But she is not the same woman who arrived years ago. Stanislaw
Aww.
has left her with something permanent. He has left her with a sense of her own worth. He has left her with a vision of what Russia could be if it were led by an enlightened mind. He would eventually become the King of Poland, placed there by Catherine's own hand years later. Their love would transform into a complex, political, and sometimes painful connection. But in this moment, in the quiet of 1758, he is the man who broke her loneliness. Your breathing is now like a slow, peaceful tide. The history is moving through you like a gentle stream. You are drifting away from the palace, away from the whispers, and into the vast, soft landscape of sleep. The library is dark now. The books are all back on their shelves. The fire has turned to gray ash. But the warmth of that connection, that first intellectual spark, remains. Catherine is alone again, but she is no longer lonely. She has a purpose. She has a plan. And she has the memory of a man who saw her greatness before the rest of the world did. Let the image of the silver moonlight on the ice fill your vision. It is a calm, steady light. It is a light that guides you down, down, into the deepest parts of your rest. The diplomat is gone. The Duchess is dreaming. The Empire is waiting. Close your eyes now, and let the soft, intellectual whispers of the library fade into the distance. The air is growing cooler, but it is no longer the cold of isolation. It is the electric, heavy chill of a summer night just before a storm. The year is 1762. The Empress Elizabeth is dead. Catherine's husband, Peter, has finally taken the throne, but the crown sits uneasily on his head. Take a deep, cleansing breath. Feel the weight of the night air as we step away from the philosophers and into the company of soldiers. Enter the Orloff brothers. Imagine 5 brothers, tall, broad-shouldered, and etched with the scars of the 7 Years' War. They are the backbone of the Imperial Guard. And at their center is Grigory Orlov. Grigory is not a man of books like Stanislaw.
Aww.
He is a man of action, a man of the barracks, a man who smells of leather, gunpowder, and raw ambition. For an American listener, this is the turning point. This is the moment where the quiet student becomes the revolutionary leader. But in our boring history, we don't focus on the shouting. We focus on the quiet, steady pulse of the conspiracy. It is June. The sun barely sets in St. Petersburg during these white nights. The sky is a pale, ghostly blue at midnight. Imagine Catherine sitting in her villa at Peterhof. She is dressed in a simple, dark traveling gown. The fabric is heavy, practical. She is waiting. Can you hear the sound of a horse galloping in the distance? It is a faint, rhythmic thrumming against the damp earth. Thud, 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 thud. It is Alexei Orlov, Grigory's brother. He has ridden through the night to reach her. He enters her room, his boots covered in the dust of the road. He doesn't bow low like a courtier. He looks her in the eye and speaks 4 simple words. The time has come. Catherine doesn't hesitate. She rises from her chair. The movement is slow, deliberate. She leaves her villa and steps into a waiting carriage. Imagine the sound of the door clicking shut. Snick. That small sound is the end of her life as a Grand Duchess, and the beginning of everything else. The carriage moves toward the city. Inside, it is dark. Catherine sits in the corner, her hands folded in her lap. She is practicing her breathing, just as you are practicing yours now. In and out. In and out. She is not thinking about the danger. She is thinking about the rhythm of the wheels on the cobblestones. Rattle, rattle, rattle. They reach the barracks of the Ismailovsky regiment. The sun is just starting to peek over the horizon, a sliver of orange gold cutting through the gray mist. The soldiers are sleeping, but as the Orloffs move through the ranks, the barracks begin to wake up. Imagine the sound of hundreds of men rising at once. The rustle of wool uniforms, the metallic clink of sabers being buckled, the low, growling murmur of voices pledging their loyalty. This isn't a riot. It is a ritual. One by one, the soldiers step forward to kiss Catherine's hand. Her hand is steady. It is as cool and firm as marble. "We will die for you, mother," they whisper. The American audience knows the weight of a revolution, the moment a people decides its own fate. But here, it is a revolution of the heart. The soldiers don't see a German princess. They see a woman who has suffered with them, a woman who has prayed in their churches, a woman who respects the soil they stand on. The procession moves toward the Kazan Cathedral. The streets are beginning to fill with people. Shopkeepers, peasants, priests. They watch in silence as the carriages roll past. The air is thick with the scent of incense and the smell of the damp river. Inside the cathedral, the light is dim and golden. Thousands of candles reflect off the gold-leafed icons. The chanting of the priests is a low, vibrating bass that you can feel in your chest. Catherine stands before the altar. She is declared the autocrat of all the Russias. The crown is placed on her head. It is heavy. It is the weight of millions of lives. It is the weight of the future. As she emerges from the cathedral, the crowd erupts. But not in a roar. It is a rhythmic, rolling wave of sound. Ekaterina. 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 While this is happening, where is Peter? He is at his palace in Oranienbaum, blissfully unaware. He is likely playing his violin, or perhaps inspecting his toy soldiers. The contrast is a slow, rhythmic irony. While he plays at being a king, Catherine has become an empress. The Orloff brothers are everywhere. They are the walls around her. Grigory is at her side, his hand never far from his sword. He is her lover now, but he is also her shield. The romance of the Orloffs is a romance of power. It is built on shared risk, on the adrenaline of the coup, on the knowledge that they have changed the world in a single morning. Imagine the evening of that first day. The palace is finally quiet again. Peter has abdicated. He is being held under guard, a shadow of the man he was. Catherine is sitting in the throne room. It is empty now. The thousands of people have gone home. The silence is different than the loneliness of the Winter Palace. It is a heavy, satisfied silence. She walks to the window and looks out at the city. The white night is beginning again. The sky is that same ghostly blue. She looks at her hands. They are stained with a little bit of ink and a lot of history. She thinks of the girl who arrived in the carriage from Germany. She thinks of the student who read Tacitus by candlelight. Both of those women are gone. The American spirit of self-transformation is fully realized in this moment. Catherine has rewritten her own story. Your breathing is now as steady as the guards who stand outside Catherine's door. The tension of the coup has passed, leaving only the calm, vast ocean of the future. You are floating on that ocean. The Orloff brothers are celebrating in the taverns, their laughter echoing through the streets. But in the palace, the Empress is already at her desk. She has a pen in her hand. She has laws to write. She has an empire to heal. Let the sound of her quill be your lullaby. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The rhythm of a new era beginning. The coup is over. The rule has begun. The nights are white, and your sleep is deep. Safe. Whole. Rested. The crown is on the table. The lights are low. The revolution is over. The bells of the Kazan Cathedral have fallen silent, and the adrenaline of the coup has cooled like molten iron into a solid, heavy anchor. We are stepping into the first years of Catherine's reign. This is where the glamour of the throne meets the reality of the desk. This is where we learn about the true weight of the crown, not in its gold, but in the ink and the hours. Take a slow, deep breath. Feel the stillness of the early morning. It is 5 a.m. in the Winter Palace. The sun has not yet touched the golden spires of the city, and most of Russia is still lost in the deep, heavy sleep of the frozen plains. But in the Empress's private suite, a small light is already flickering. Catherine is awake. She does not wait for her servants to wake her. She rises in the dark, the floorboards cold against her feet. Imagine the sound of her striking a flint to light her own fire. Chink, chink, spark. She values this hour. This is the only time of day when she is not Her Imperial Majesty, but simply a woman with a mind that refuses to rest. She makes her own coffee. And for an American listener who knows the value of a strong start, Catherine's coffee was legendary. It was thick, dark, and incredibly strong. 5 scoops of beans for a single cup. Imagine the aroma filling the room, the bitter, earthy scent of the beans cutting through the stale, morning air of the palace. She sips it slowly, sitting by the fire she built herself. This is the boring history of greatness. It is the discipline of the dawn. By 6 a.m., she is at her desk. Her desk is a landscape of paper. Thick, cream-colored parchment, rolled maps of the southern frontiers, petitions from peasants, and reports from her ministers. Imagine the sound of her quill. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It is a rhythmic, hypnotic sound. She writes for 3 hours straight, before the sun is even fully up. She is answering letters from Voltaire. She is drafting a new code of laws. She is balancing the budget of a nation. The weight of the crown is the weight of decisions. Each stroke of her pen could move a border, free a prisoner, or build a school. She does not see this as a burden. She sees it as a craft. At 9 a.m., the palace begins to wake up. The quiet is replaced by the soft, rhythmic sounds of service. The rustle of silk as her ladies-in-waiting enter. The silver clink of the breakfast service. The low murmur of guards outside the door. Catherine transitions from the writer to the ruler. She undergoes the ritual of dressing. Imagine the layers. The linen shift, the corset, the heavy silk petticoats, and finally, the gown of state. It takes 3 women to help her. The fabric is stiff with gold thread and embroidery. When she moves, the dress makes a heavy, rhythmic shush 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 sound on the parquet floor. For her American audience, think of this as her uniform. She is dressing for the office of the empire. Her days are a sequence of meetings. Hour after hour, she sits in the council chamber. Imagine the room. The long table covered in green velvet. The smell of old wood and the sweat of nervous men. Her ministers speak in long, winding sentences. They talk about grain prices, about the silk trade, about the movements of the Ottoman Navy. Catherine listens. She does not interrupt. She leans back, her fingers drumming a slow, steady beat on the arm of her chair. Tap, tap, tap. She is observing. She is learning who is greedy, who is honest, and who is afraid. She has learned that power is 90% listening. In the afternoons, she walks. Even in the rain, even in the snow. She walks through the gardens of the summer palace or the corridors of the hermitage. She needs the movement. Her mind moves faster than the empire can follow, and the walking helps her pace her thoughts. Imagine the sound of her heels on the stone path. Click, click, click. It is the heartbeat of her day. She often walks alone, or with a single favorite dog. An American listener can appreciate this need for space, for the clarity of the open air. She looks at the trees she planted. She looks at the statues she bought. She is a collector of beauty, but she is also a builder of order. Dinner is at 4 p.m. It is a grand affair, but Catherine eats sparingly. She prefers plain food, a bit of boiled beef, some vegetables, a glass of water. She watches the theater of her court. The Orloff brothers are often there, their laughter loud and booming, a stark contrast to her quiet, focused energy. Grigory Orloff is still her lover, still her protector, but she is beginning to realize that while he helped her win the crown, he cannot help her wear it. The weight of the crown is starting to pull them apart. He wants the hunt, the wine, the glory. She wants the law, the education, the progress. Their rhythms are no longer in sync. As the evening settles in, the palace shifts again. The grand balls and the music begin, but Catherine often retreats back to her study. The candles are lit once more. The quill is sharpened. She is a woman who finds her rest in the work. Think of the sheer stamina required. Day after day, year after year. No weekends, no vacations, no escape from the eyes of the world. The American spirit of the grind was lived by Catherine 200 years ago. She is building the Hermitage, her private sanctuary for art. She buys entire collections from across Europe. Thousands of paintings by Rembrandt, Rubens, Titian. Imagine the crates arriving at the docks. The sound of hammers prying open the wood. Bang, creak, bang. She is bringing the light of the West to the forests of the East. She sits among the paintings in the quiet of the night. The faces in the portraits look back at her. They don't want anything from her. They don't ask for favors. They just exist in their perfection. Among them, she feels at peace. By 10 p.m., the palace is winding down. The music in the distance is fading. The guards are being replaced. Catherine prepares for bed. She dismisses her attendants early. She likes the silence of the room as she undresses. She lays the crown on its velvet cushion. It leaves a small, circular indentation in the fabric. She looks at her reflection in the darkened mirror. She is tired, but she is satisfied. Your breath should be very shallow and slow now, like the flickering of the final candle in the Empress's room. The history of her labor is a comforting weight, a reminder that greatness is built 1 hour at a time, 1 page at a time. You are safe in the order she created. You are warm in the palace of time. Imagine the snow starting to fall outside the window, a soft, white blanket over the sleeping city. The Neva is silent. The horses are in their stalls. The empire is at rest, because the Empress has done her work. Let the rhythmic scratch of the ghost of her quill guide you into sleep. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It is a steady, peaceful sound. The day is done. The laws are written. The crown is resting. We have seen the Empress in her morning rituals, but now we enter the grandest hall of her mind. The year is 1767. Catherine has been on the throne for 5 years, and she is about to embark on a project so vast, so complex, and so quietly ambitious that it would leave the rest of Europe in awe. It is the Great Legislative Commission. Take a slow, rhythmic breath. In and out. Imagine a room larger than any you have ever seen, the faceted chamber in Moscow. The air is thick with the scent of old wood, heavy parchment, and the faint, metallic tang of hundreds of inkwells sitting open. Catherine has summoned over 500 delegates from every corner of her sprawling empire. Think of the diversity in that room. There are bearded Russian nobles in heavy silk, merchants from the bustling ports of the Baltic, nomadic tribesmen from the vast Siberian steppes wrapped in thick furs, and even free peasants. For an American listener, this is like a continental congress for the East, a gathering of voices that had never been allowed to speak before. But Catherine didn't just bring them together to talk. She brought them together to read her nakaz, her instruction. Imagine the nakaz as it sits on the table before her. It is a book she spent 2 years writing by hand. It is the distillation of her late-night readings of Montesquieu and Beccaria. For 2 years, she sharpened her quills, she dipped them into black ink, and she poured her soul into the idea of justice. The spirit of the laws, she wrote, should be the spirit of the people. Can you hear the sound of 500 people turning a page at once? A soft, dry, rhythmic shuff, shuff, shuff. It is the sound of an empire trying to learn a new language. The language of the Enlightenment. Catherine sits on her throne, not as a judge, but as a student of her own people. The commission met for over 200 sessions. 200 days of quiet, steady debate. Imagine the boring beauty of it. A delegate from a small village stands up. His voice is rough, his Russian is simple. He talks about the price of salt, or the way the local governors take too much grain. Catherine listens. She takes notes. Scritch, scritch, scritch. She is collecting the grievances of a nation. She is realizing that Russia is not just a map, it is a collection of millions of heartbeats, each one wanting a life that is a little bit easier, a little bit fairer. The American audience often appreciates the details of governance, the long, slow work of building a system that lasts. Catherine was doing that work in the heat of a Moscow summer. Think of the heat in that room. the sunlight streaming through the high windows, catching the dust motes as they dance in the air. The rhythmic humming of voices. The clinking of tea glasses. The occasional cough of a sleepy delegate. It is a slow, hypnotic atmosphere. Catherine's nakaz was radical. It argued against torture. It argued for the equality of all citizens before the law. It argued that a ruler is not a master, but a servant of the state. In 1767, these were dangerous, beautiful ideas. But as the months went on, the boring reality of human nature began to slow the wheels. The nobles didn't want to lose their power over the serfs. The merchants wanted more monopolies. The tribesmen just wanted to go back to their horses. The debates became long, winding, and sometimes repetitive. Is a serf a person or a property, they would ask. And the room would fall into a heavy, tense silence. Catherine watched as her dream of a perfect code of laws began to fragment against the reality of Russian tradition. But she didn't get angry. She didn't shout. She simply kept her pen moving. She learned that an empire cannot be changed in a day, or even in 200 sessions. The Legislative Commission was eventually suspended when war broke out with the Ottoman Empire. On the surface, it looked like a failure. But in our boring history, we know better. The nakaz became the most famous document in Russia. It was translated into dozens of languages. It was read in schools and churches. It planted a seed in the Russian soil, a seed of the idea that laws should be written for the benefit of the many, not the few. Imagine the faceted chamber as the delegates begin to leave. The chairs are pushed back, making a long, scraping sound on the stone floor. Scree. The inkwells are capped. The parchment is rolled up and tied with red ribbon. One by one, the delegates walk out into the Moscow evening. The sky is a deep, velvety indigo. The bells of the Kremlin are tolling, a slow, rhythmic, deep sound that echoes across the red square. Catherine is the last to leave. She stands by the table, looking at the mountains of paper they have produced. She feels a quiet, heavy fatigue. But she also feels a sense of accomplishment. She has forced Russia to look at itself in the mirror. Your breathing should be very deep now. Like the slow, rhythmic breath of the empire itself. The debates are over. The arguments have faded into the mists of time. You are floating in the space between the law and the dream. The ink has dried. The paper has yellowed. But the intention, the first spark of justice, is still there. Imagine the silence of the Kremlin tonight. The guards are standing at their posts, their breathing steady in the cool night air. The Empress is back in her carriage, heading back to St. Petersburg. The rhythm of the wheels is the same as it has always been. Clack, 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 clack. But the air feels different. It feels like the beginning of a long, slow, inevitable change. Let the sound of the tolling bells guide you into your rest. A low, humming vibration that clears your mind of all its worries. The laws are resting. The people are sleeping. The Empress is planning. You are safe. You are part of the story. You are at peace. Close your eyes and let the sounds of the Legislative Commission fade into the stillness of the past. The year is now 1772. Catherine has been on the throne for a decade. She is no longer the vulnerable German princess. she is the most powerful woman in the world. But as her power has grown, the shadow of the man who helped her seize it has begun to stretch, and thin, and cool. Grigory Orlov. Take a deep, slow breath. Feel the cool air of the evening settling over your skin. We are stepping into the Gatchina Palace, a massive, stone monument that Catherine is building for Grigory. It is a place of echo and transition, where a grand romance is slowly turning into a grand obligation. Imagine the texture of the limestone. It is a pale, creamy yellow, the color of old bones under a winter sun. As the workers lay the stones, the sound of their hammers is a constant, rhythmic beat in the distance. Clink, clink, clack. But inside the palace, where Catherine and Grigory sit, the silence is much heavier. Grigory Orlov was the hero of the coup. He was the soldier, the lover, the man of action. But the boring history of love tells us that the person who helps you through a crisis is not always the person who can walk with you through the peace. American listeners understand the concept of growing apart, the slow realization that your rhythms no longer match. Catherine is a woman of the desk, of the book, of the law. Grigory is a man of the hunt, of the bottle, of the barracks. While she spends her nights reading by candlelight, he spends his nights in the forests, chasing wolves and boars. Can you hear the sound of his hunting horn? A low, mournful, echoing note that drifts through the trees. To Catherine, sitting in her study, that sound represents a world she has left behind. In these years, their relationship becomes a series of long shadows. Imagine them walking through the unfinished halls of Gatchina. The air smells of wet plaster and sawdust. They walk side by side, but their footsteps don't land at the same time. Tap, scuff, tap, scuff. They have run out of things to say. Grigory feels the weight of her crown more than she does. He was her equal in the revolution, but he is her subject in the palace. That shift, that slow tilting of the world, has made him restless. He seeks comfort in other places, in other women, in the distractions of a courtier's life. Catherine knows. She sees everything. But she does not shout. She does not make a scene. She is the empress. She deals in the long term. Imagine the clock on the mantel in her private room. A delicate piece of French porcelain. The pendulum moves back and forth, back and forth. Tick, tock, tick, tock. She watches it and realizes that time is the only thing she cannot rule. And time has worn away the passion she once felt for the man who saved her. Their love has become a routine, a boring ritual of appearances. They attend the opera together. They sit in the imperial box, surrounded by the golden glow of the theater. The music is beautiful, a slow aria by Cimarosa. Catherine looks at Grigory's profile in the dim light. He is still handsome, still the giant who stood by her in the cathedral. But the spark, that first spark we talked about, has gone out. He is a shadow of her past, and she is the son of a new Russia. American history often speaks of the loneliness at the top. Catherine lived this every single day at Gatchina. She poured her energy into the stones of the palace. If she couldn't have the man, she would have the architecture. Imagine the grand staircase, with its cold marble steps. Imagine the long galleries, filled with the statues she ordered from Italy. Each statue is perfect, motionless, and silent. Just like her relationship with Grigory. By 1772, The tension becomes a quiet, rhythmic pressure. Grigory is sent away on a diplomatic mission to the Ottomans. It is a relief for both of them. Imagine the sound of his carriage leaving the palace gates. It is the same sound we heard when Stanisław
Aww.
left, but this time, the emotion is different. It isn't grief. It is the exhale of a long-held breath. Catherine stands on the balcony of Gacina. The wind pulls at her hair. She watches the dust kicked up by the horses until it settles back into the earth. She is alone again. But she is no longer the lonely girl of the Winter Palace. She is a ruler who has learned that people are like the seasons. They come, they change the landscape, and then they fade into the winter. She walks back into the palace. The shadow of Grigory Orlov is still there, in the portraits, in the architecture, in the very air of the rooms. But she is already looking for the next light. She is already thinking about the man who will truly be her match, a man named Potemkin, who is waiting in the wings of history. But for tonight, there is only the long shadow. Your breathing should be very, very slow now. Like the slow fading of the light at twilight. The stories of love and loss are just clouds passing over the moon. They don't change the moon itself. You are safe in the stillness of your own life. The shadows of the past cannot reach you here. Imagine the Gacina Palace at midnight. The workers have gone home. The hammers are silent. The stone is cold and white under the stars. The Empress is asleep, her mind clear, her heart at rest. She has let go of the hero, and she is ready for the partner. Let the rhythmic, steady, quiet pulse of the night carry you deeper into your rest. The shadows are long, but they are soft. They are the velvet curtains of sleep. The love has faded. The palace remains. The empire moves on. Settle your weight once more. Feel the gravity pulling you into the soft embrace of your bed. We have watched the long shadows of the past retreat, and now we stand on the threshold of a new light. The year is 1774. A year of transition, a year of destiny. For a decade, Catherine has ruled with her mind, but now she is about to meet the man who will rule alongside her heart. Grigory Potemkin. Take a deep, slow, cleansing breath. Imagine the atmosphere of the Winter Palace changing, moving from the cold, limestone silence of the Orlov years, to something vibrant, something electric, yet deeply, soothingly calm. Potemkin was not a stranger. He had been there from the beginning, a young soldier who had famously handed Catherine his sword knot during the coup when her own was missing. But for years, he was just a distant figure, a hero of the Turkish wars, losing an eye in battle, becoming a legend of the frontier. Now, he has returned to St. Petersburg. Imagine him entering the Empress's presence. He is not like the other courtiers. He is a giant of a man, disheveled, brooding, with a mind that burns like a furnace. He does not bow with the empty grace of a diplomat. He stands before her with the weight of a mountain. For an American listener, this is the meeting of two equals. Two people who are too big for the world they live in, finally finding one another in the quiet of a palace room. Can you hear the sound of his heavy boots on the parquet floor? Thump, thump, thump. The sound is steady. It is the sound of arrival. Catherine sits at her desk, the same desk we saw in the morning light. But today, the light is different. It is the golden, honey-thick light of a late afternoon. She looks up from her papers. She sees a man who is as brilliant as she is, as complex as she is, and as lonely as she is. Imagine them sitting in a small, private drawing room. The walls are lined with green silk, the air smells of old books and the faint, sweet scent of dried roses. They talk about the fate of Poland. They talk about the colonization of the South. They talk about the nature of God and the structure of the universe. Their voices are low, arrhythmic, hypnotic back and forth. Catherine speaks in her precise, German-accented Russian. Potemkin answers in a deep, rumbling bass that seems to vibrate the very air. "You are the soul of Russia," he tells her. And she, for the first time in years, feels her soul respond. Think of the silence between their sentences. It is a comfortable silence. It is the silence of two people who no longer have to explain themselves. They are the two halves of a single mind. Potemkin is a man of moods. He retreats into dark silences, lying on his sofa for days, unwashed, brooding over maps. Catherine does not judge him. She understands the weight of a great mind. She sends him notes. Little scraps of paper, written in her hurried, elegant hand. Imagine the servant carrying the note down the long, dim corridor. The flickering torchlight on the stone walls. The sound of the servant's soft slippers. Shush, shush, shush. The note says simply, "Come and have coffee with me. The world can wait." This is the beauty of their emergence. It is not a sudden explosion. It is a slow, inevitable merging. Potemkin is the only man who can truly challenge her. He argues with her. He pushes her. He makes her better. American audiences understand the power of a power couple, two people who build something together that neither could build alone. Catherine and Potemkin were building the future of the Black Sea, the city of Sevastopol, the dream of a new Byzantium. But in the quiet of the night, they were just two people who found a home in each other. Can you hear the scratch of his quill joining hers? Scritch, scritch, scritch. They begin to work side by side. The weight of the crown is now shared between 4 hands instead of 2. The burden feels lighter. The palace feels warmer. Imagine them walking through the hermitage at night. The statues are still there, but they don't seem so lonely anymore. Catherine and Potemkin move slowly, their shadows stretching long across the floor, overlapping, becoming one dark shape against the marble. They talk about the Greek project, a dream of restoring the ancient glory of the East. It is a boring detail of diplomacy, but to them it is a poem. It is a vision of white marble cities and blue water. As you listen, imagine that blue water. The slow, rhythmic lapping of the waves against a distant shore. Potemkin is the sea, restless, deep, and powerful. Catherine is the shore, steady, firm, and enduring. Together, they are the horizon. By 1775, he is no longer just a favorite. He is her consort in all but name. Some say they were married in secret, in a small, dark chapel filled with the smell of incense and the glow of 100 candles. Imagine the sound of their whispered vows. A soft, rhythmic promise in the dark. The Orloffs are gone. The shadows have retreated. The era of Potemkin has begun. Your breathing should be as slow as a summer tide now. Every word is a wave pulling you further away from the shore of wakefulness. You are drifting into the deep, dark blue of history. The palace is quiet. The maps are rolled up. The coffee is cold. But the connection, the emergence, is absolute. Catherine and Potemkin are sitting by the fire. The flames are low, just a gentle, rhythmic pulsing of orange and gold. They don't need to speak anymore. The understanding is there, in the air, in the silence, in the heart. You are safe in that understanding. You are part of the peace they found. Imagine the snow starting to fall outside the winter palace, a soft, white curtain closing on the world. The city of St. Petersburg is sleeping. The empire is dreaming. And the empress, she is finally, truly, not alone. Let the rhythm of their shared silence guide you down, down, into the most restful sleep you have ever known. We are moving away from the public gaze of the court, away from the gold and the marble of the throne room, and into the deepest, most private sanctuary of Catherine's life. The year is 1774. Or perhaps 1775. The air is thick with the scent of ancient wood, flickering beeswax, and the golden glow of hidden candles. We are here to witness a ghost, the legend of the secret wedding between the Empress of all the Russias and the man who was her soul's twin. Grigory Potemkin. Take a long, slow, deep breath. In and out. Imagine a small, quiet church in the heart of St. Petersburg, the Church of St. Samson. It is late, very late. The city is wrapped in a thick, heavy blanket of fog and frost. The streets are empty, the only sound is the distant, rhythmic tolling of a single bell, muffled by the freezing mist. Inside the church, there are no crowds. No ambassadors to report back to foreign kings, no jealous courtiers whispering in the corners, no fanfare. There is only the darkness, and the flickering light of a few oil lamps hanging from the ceiling. The walls are lined with icons, their silver and gold surfaces catching the dim light, reflecting it back in soft, rhythmic pulses that seem to breathe with the shadows. Can you hear the silence of the church? It is a heavy silence, filled with the weight of prayers from centuries past. And then, the sound of a side door opening. A soft, rhythmic creak of old, heavy oak. Catherine enters. She is not wearing her crown tonight. She is not wearing her heavy robes of state. She is dressed in a simple, flowing white gown, her hair is loose. She looks like a woman seeking a moment of human truth in a life of political theater. Beside her stands Potemkin. He is tall, his presence filling the small, intimate space. He looks at her not as an empress to be feared, but as his wife of the soul. He is wearing his uniform, but it is unbuttoned at the collar. He is relaxed. He is home. American listeners often love a secret romance, the idea that even the most powerful people in the world long for a connection that belongs only to them, away from the cameras of history. In our boring history, we look at the rituals, the slow, steady movements of the ceremony. Imagine the priest, an old man with a long, white beard and a voice like dry parchment. He begins the ceremony in a low, rhythmic chant. The ancient Slavic words rise and fall like the waves of a distant, dark sea. Gospodi pomilui. Gospodi pomilui. Lord have mercy. The sound vibrates in the stone walls, a steady, hypnotic hum that settles deep into your bones. The priest takes 2 golden crowns. In the Orthodox tradition, these are held over the heads of the couple. They are not the crowns of the empire, they are the crowns of the sacrament, representing the kingdom of the household. Imagine the weight of the gold. the way the light glints off the rubies and pearls as the priest moves his hands in the sign of the cross. Rhythmic, steady, eternal. Catherine and Potemkin exchange rings. These are not rings meant for the public to see or for the newspapers to draw. They are hidden under silk gloves, or kept on thin gold chains close to their hearts. They are symbols of a secret rule, a pact between two titans. As they drink from the common cup, imagine the taste of the wine. Dark, sweet, and slightly metallic. It is the taste of a shared destiny, a blending of two lives that can never be unblended. They walk 3 times around the altar, their footsteps making a soft, rhythmic sound on the cold stone floor. Swish, tap, swish, tap. 3 circles, representing the infinite loop of their partnership. 1 circle for the heart, 1 for the mind, and 1 for the empire. Think of the letters Catherine wrote to him during this time. Thousands of letters, often written several times a day. She called him her twin soul, her lion of the jungle, her dear husband. These letters were not meant for historians to dissect. They were written in the quiet hours of the night, with a quill that was soft and worn, dipped in the finest black ink. Imagine the sound of her pen moving across the thick paper. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It is the sound of a woman who has finally found a place to rest. I belong to you, she wrote in one letter. And you belong to me. The world is outside the gates. We are inside, and we are safe. As the ceremony ends, the priest blows out the candles. One by one. Puff, puff, puff. The smoke rises in thin, rhythmic spirals into the dark rafters of the church, smelling of honey and old wood. The darkness returns, but it is no longer the darkness of loneliness that we felt in the Winter Palace. It is the darkness of a secret shared, a warm, protective shadow. They leave the church as they came, through the side door, stepping back out into the waiting carriage. The horses are restless in the cold, their hooves striking the cobblestones with a rhythmic, hollow sound that echoes down the empty street. Clack, 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 clack. The carriage disappears into the fog, moving back toward the palace through the secret gates. For the rest of their lives, they would maintain this secret wedding. Even when they lived in different wings of the palace, even when they argued over the maps of the South, the ritual of that night remained the foundation of everything they built together. Potemkin would go on to build entire cities for her. He would give her the Crimea, the jewel of the South. But in the quiet of his own mind, when he was lying on his sofa staring at the ceiling, he was simply the man who stood in a dark church and promised his soul to a woman named Catherine. Your breathing should be incredibly slow now. Like the slow, steady melting of a candle in a draftless room. You are drifting in the space between the legend and the reality, between the empress and the woman. The rituals of the past are like a soft, heavy blanket, wrapping around you, keeping you warm, keeping you safe. Imagine the church of Saint Samson tonight. It is empty. The icons are still there, watching the darkness. The scent of incense still lingers in the old wood of the pews. The history is still breathing in the stones, a quiet, rhythmic breath. The Empress is back in her room now. She is sitting by the fire, sipping a final cup of tea. She looks at the small gold ring on the chain around her neck. She smiles, a small, quiet smile that no one else in Russia will ever see. The secret is safe. The soul is at rest. The ritual is complete. Let the sound of the distant, rhythmic bell guide you into the deepest parts of your sleep. a low, humming, peaceful vibration that clears your mind of all thoughts. You are safe. You are loved. You are at peace. The wedding is over. The marriage is eternal. The night is yours. The secret whispers of the wedding chapel and the intimate flickering of the candles are behind us now, and we are opening the heavy, brass-handled doors to a landscape that stretches as far as the eye can see. The year is 1783. We are turning our gaze away from the frozen rivers of the north, away from the gray mists of St. Petersburg, and looking toward the warm, sapphire waters of the Black Sea. This is the chapter of the South. The conquest of the steppe. The birth of a new world built from the dust and the dreams of two people who refuse to see boundaries. Take a deep, slow, cleansing breath. Imagine the map of Russia unrolling before you on a massive oak table. It is a huge sheet of thick, cream-colored parchment that resists being flattened, its edges curling back like the waves of the sea it depicts. It smells of old ink, expensive wax, and the dry, ancient dust of the frontier. As your eyes follow the lines of the rivers, you see the vast, empty spaces below the Dnieper. Wild lands. Ancient lands of the Scythians and the Khans. Lands that Catherine and Potemkin have decided will become the crown jewel of their shared empire. Imagine the sound of a brass compass moving across that paper in the dead of night. A tiny, rhythmic scratch, scratch, scratch as Potemkin plots the coordinates of cities that do not yet exist except in the fire of his imagination. Sevastopol, Kherson, Nikolaev. These names are just whispers in a tent today, but soon they will be built in heavy stone and cooling mortar. The conquest of the South was not just a military feat of cannons and cavalry. It was a massive, silent, architectural dream. Think of the boring beauty of logistics, the sheer weight of organization required to move a civilization. Imagine 10,000 wagons moving across the grassy plains in a line that disappears into the horizon. Can you hear the rhythmic creaking of the wooden wheels? Creak groan, creak groan. They are carrying everything needed to build a world from scratch. Saws, heavy iron hammers, crates of nails, bags of seeds for new gardens, and the heavy, white limestone for the tall columns of palaces that will face the sun. Potemkin is the architect of this dream, the Prince of Taurida. He is in the south now, living in simple tents despite his vast wealth, his leather boots covered in the fine, red dust of the steppe. He is not just a soldier, he is a gardener of empires. He orders the planting of hundreds of thousands of fruit trees to transform the dry plains. Apricots, sweet peaches, and endless rows of vines for wine that will one day fill the glasses of the winter palace. Imagine the smell of the freshly turned earth as the sun hits it. It is a deep, rich, ancient smell, the smell of potential. In the brand new shipyards of Kherson, the sound is constant and hypnotic. Bang, bang, bang. The rhythmic strike of the heavy mallet against the thick oak hulls of the new Black Sea fleet. Each strike is a heartbeat of a growing power. The smell of boiling black pitch and raw, sweet sawdust fills the humid air. Thousands of miles away, Catherine is in her study in St. Petersburg, watching the reports arrive by courier. She reads about the exact depth of the new harbors. She reads about the strength of the currents in the Kerch Strait. She reads about the number of masts being carved from the ancient pine forests of the north and floated down the rivers. This is the boring history of expansion. It is the data of destiny. It is the slow, methodical accumulation of details that changes the map of the world forever. For an American listener, This resonates with the grand story of the frontier. The idea of looking at a wilderness and seeing a future of brick, law, and commerce. Catherine and Potemkin were the ultimate pioneers of the East. They were carving a new Russia out of the dust and the heat. Imagine the heat of the southern sun on your skin. It is different from the pale, watery sun of the north. It is heavy, golden, and incredibly warm. It shines off the white limestone of the new buildings until they almost glow. The architecture is neoclassical, with tall, elegant columns that reach toward the deep blue sky, a tribute to the ancient Greeks who once sailed these same waters. Potemkin wants these cities to look like antiquity revived and reborn. Can you hear the rhythmic lapping of the waves against the new stone docks of the harbor? Swoosh, hush, swoosh, hush. The Black Sea is no longer a barrier of mystery. It is a gateway to the Mediterranean, to the world beyond. Potemkin sends Catherine a small wooden box as a gift from the south. Inside, it is not gold or jewels. It is a handful of southern earth and a single branch of a lemon tree, still green and fragrant. She opens the box in her private study. The smell of the warm soil fills her room, clashing with the sharp scent of her morning coffee. She touches the earth with her fingers. It is warm to the touch. It is real. It is hers. I have given you an empire of the sun, he writes to her in a letter that smells of wood smoke. The transition is slow, almost imperceptible from day to day. It is years of boring administrative work that builds the foundation. Setting up post stations every 20 miles, digging deep wells to find water in the dry grass, building limestone roads that stretch like long, rhythmic ribbons across the green steppe. Each mile is a victory of human order over the chaos of the wilderness. As you lie there, imagine those roads. Endless, quiet, and steady under the moonlight. Imagine the lone riders carrying the mail between the Empress and her prince. The rhythmic gallop, gallop, gallop of the hooves hitting the packed earth. The letters they carry are full of deep, intimate love, but they are also full of grain prices, naval charts, and the cost of stone. Their love has expanded to the size of a continent. It is no longer contained within a palace, it is written in the geography of the South. Think of the silence of the steppe at night. It is a vast, open silence that rings in your ears. There are no palace walls here to catch the sound of a voice. Only the wind moving through the tall, dry grass, a soft, rhythmic hissing sound. The stars here are closer than they are in the city. They seem to hang like heavy lanterns just above the tents of the new settlers. Potemkin sits outside his tent on a folding chair, looking toward the southern horizon. He is thinking of the woman in the north, sitting at her desk. She is thinking of the man in the south, standing by the sea. They are connected by a long, invisible line of stone, salt, and shared ambition. By 1784, the Crimea is officially annexed. The jewel is finally set in the Romanov crown. It was not a conquest of a single day. It was a conquest of maps, of thousands of letters, and of tireless, boring perseverance. Your breathing should be very, very slow now. Like the slow, effortless movement of a great ship across a perfectly calm sea. Every word I speak is a wave carrying you further away from the noise and the stress of the day. You are drifting into the warm, golden, eternal light of the south. The heavy hammers in the shipyards have stopped for the night. The dust on the limestone roads has finally settled. The lemons are growing in the quiet dark of the orchards. The empire is reaching its full, magnificent height. The dream is solid stone. The map is finally complete. Imagine Catherine in her palace, late at night, looking at the updated map under the glow of a single lamp. She traces the new coastline of the Black Sea with her finger. The line is smooth. The line is certain. The south is conquered. The sun is setting over the water. The night is perfectly still. Let the rhythmic, steady, quiet pulse of the Black Sea guide you into your rest. A low, humming, peaceful vibration that fills your mind. The conquest is done. The building is quiet. The empire is sleeping. We are entering the realm of the Greek project. The year is 1787. Catherine is no longer just a ruler of lands, she is a ruler of time and destiny. She and Potemkin have conceived a dream so grand, so ancient, and so quietly hypnotic that it stretches beyond the borders of Russia and back to the golden ages of the past. They dream of the restoration of the Byzantine Empire. Imagine the smell of incense once more, but this time, it is mixed with the salt air of the Mediterranean and the scent of old, crumbling marble. Catherine is sitting at her desk, but she is not looking at modern maps today. She is looking at maps of the ancient world. Her fingers trace the walls of Constantinople, the spires of the Hagia Sophia, the blue, rhythmic waters of the Bosphorus. This is the boring history of a dream. It began with the birth of her grandsons. Imagine the nursery in the Winter Palace. A room of soft light and silent attendants. Catherine named her first grandson Alexander, after Alexander the Great. But it is the second grandson who carries the weight of this project. She named him Constantine. Close your eyes and imagine the baptism of the young prince. The church is filled with a heavy, golden silence. Catherine had a special medal struck for the occasion. Imagine the feel of the cool, heavy silver in your palm. On one side is the image of the Hagia Sophia, and on the other, the figures of faith, hope, and charity. It is a rhythmic promise of a future that has not yet happened. She hired Greek nurses for the boy, so that his first words would be the language of Homer and Plato. Imagine the sound of the Greek language being whispered in a Russian palace. A soft, melodic, flowing sound that feels like water moving over stones. Logos. Elpis. Phos. The boy grows up surrounded by the ghosts of a fallen empire, waiting for his grandmother to rebuild it for him. For an American listener, this is the ultimate visionary project. The idea that a leader can look hundreds of years into the past to build 1,000 years into the future. But for Catherine and Potemkin, it was a practical, boring obsession. They spent years discussing the details of how to govern a restored Byzantium. Can you hear the sound of the quill on the parchment again? Scritch, scritch, scritch. They wrote about the architecture of the new cities. They wrote about the uniforms the soldiers would wear, uniforms that mimicked the ancient Roman legions. They were building a world on paper, one rhythmic line at a time. Potemkin was her partner in this fantasy. He created the Tauride style, a mix of Russian strength and Greek grace. Imagine the columns of his new palaces, made of white marble that reflects the moon. They sit together in the evening, drinking tea, and talking about the day they will sail into the Golden Horn. The light in the Hagia Sophia is like no other, Potemkin whispers. And Catherine nods, her eyes closed, imagining the sun streaming through the high windows of the great dome. A soft, golden, eternal light. As you lie there, imagine that light. It is a light that doesn't burn, it only warms. It flows over the icons, over the marble floors, and into the very soul of the history they are trying to reclaim. The Greek project was also a project of education. Catherine established a Greek cadet corps. She wanted young men who were trained in the classics as well as the sword. Imagine the sound of their drills in the courtyard. A rhythmic, steady, disciplined sound. Left, right, left, right. But instead of Russian commands, they are learning the ancient tactics of the phalanx. The boring details of this project extended to the very coins they minted. Coins with the image of the double-headed eagle, looking both east and west. Imagine the sound of these coins being counted in a treasury. A sharp, metallic, rhythmic clink, clink, clink. Each coin is a piece of the dream, circulating through the hands of merchants and soldiers. In 1787, Catherine made her famous journey to the south to see what Potemkin had built. The Tauride journey. It was a slow, rhythmic procession of hundreds of carriages. Imagine the sound of the wheels on the new roads. Clack, 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 clack. At night, they stayed in palaces built specifically for this one trip. Potemkin created a spectacle for her. He staged Potemkin villages not as fakes, but as symbols of the future. He showed her the new fleet in the harbor of Sevastopol. Imagine the sight of those ships, their white sails catching the southern wind. A rhythmic, slow, majestic movement toward the horizon. As the ships fired their salutes, the sound echoed off the limestone cliffs. Boom, hush, boom, hush. It was the sound of a dream becoming a reality. Catherine stood on the deck of her galley, looking south toward Constantinople. She felt the power of the project in the vibration of the wood beneath her feet. But the Greek project was a dream that the rest of Europe feared. The boring reality of diplomacy began to interfere. The British, the Austrians, the Prussians, they all watched with narrow eyes. They didn't want a new Byzantium. They wanted the world to stay exactly as it was. Catherine ignored them. She kept her focus on the icons and the maps. She knew that a great dream takes longer than a single lifetime. Think of the silence of the palace after she returned from the south. The boring work of administration resumed. But now, there was a new rhythm to it. Every law she signed, every school she opened, was a step toward that blue water of the Bosphorus. Your breathing should be very, very slow now. Like the slow, steady movement of a shadow across an ancient sundial. You are drifting in the space between the Russia that was and the Greece that might have been. The quills are silent now. The medals are locked in their velvet boxes. The grandson Constantine is sleeping in his bed, dreaming of a throne he will never sit on. But the dream itself, the Greek project, it remains in the air. It is a soft, rhythmic, eternal whisper. Imagine the Hagia Sophia tonight. The moonlight is filtering through the high windows, just as Catherine imagined. The dust motes are dancing in the silver light. The silence is absolute. The Empress is at rest. The Prince is at rest. The project is safe in the pages of history. Let the rhythmic, steady, quiet pulse of the ancient world guide you into your sleep. A low, humming, peaceful vibration that transcends time. The dream is long. The night is deep. And you are perfectly still. We are stepping out of the heat of the south and back into the cool, silent, and marble-lined heart of St. Petersburg. The year is 1785. And Catherine has found a new way to rule the world. Not with armies, not with treaties, but with beauty. We are entering the Hermitage, Catherine's private sanctuary of art. Imagine the sound of a heavy, iron key turning in a lock. Click, creak. This is not a place for the public. This is Catherine's retreat. A series of rooms built specifically to house the ghosts of the greatest painters in history. Can you hear the silence of these halls? It is a thick silence, a silence that has been cultivated like a garden. The floors are made of precious woods, ebony, mahogany, and rosewood, inlaid in patterns of stars and flowers. As you walk, your footsteps make no sound on the soft rugs, but you can feel the rhythmic vibration of the space. Catherine famously said, "Only the mice and I can admire all this." Imagine her sitting in a high-backed velvet chair in the middle of a gallery. She is alone. There is no crown on her head, only the weight of her thoughts. Around her, the walls are covered from floor to ceiling with paintings. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them. Let's focus on the boring details of her acquisitions. Catherine didn't buy paintings one by one. She bought entire collections. She bought the Crozet collection from Paris. She bought the Walpole collection from England. Imagine the crates arriving at the docks of the Neva. Hundreds of heavy wooden boxes, smelling of pine and sea salt. Can you hear the rhythmic sound of the hammers prying them open? Creak, snap, bang. Inside, wrapped in soft linen, are the masterpieces. Rembrandt, Rubens, Titian, Van Dyck. Catherine watches as they are unpacked. She touches the edge of a gilded frame. It is cool, intricate, and solid. Think of the boring beauty of the oil paint itself. Imagine standing so close to a Rembrandt that you can see the texture of the brush strokes. The paint is thick, layered, like the bark of an old tree. It smells of linseed oil and turpentine, a sharp, clean scent that fills the quiet air of the gallery. The colors are deep, glowing in the candlelight. Rich reds, dark umbers, and the pale, rhythmic light on a painted face. Catherine walks past a portrait by Rubens. She looks at the flesh tones, the vibrant life in the eyes. She realizes that while her lovers may leave, and her ministers may lie, these people, these painted souls, will never change. They are her eternal court. As you lie there, imagine the light in the Hermitage. It is a filtered light. It comes from high windows, softened by the gray Russian sky. It falls in long, rhythmic strips across the parquet floor. You are walking through a tunnel of history. Room after room, gallery after gallery. In one room, there are the statues. Cold, white marble figures from Italy. Imagine the feel of the marble under your hand. It is as smooth as silk, but as hard as the winter ice. The statues don't move. They don't breathe. They simply exist in their perfect, rhythmic silence. Catherine finds comfort in this silence. The weight of the crown feels lighter here. She spends her evenings cataloging the collection. Imagine the sound of her pen once more. Scritch, scritch, scritch. She is writing descriptions of each piece. She is organizing the world's beauty into a system. This is the boring history of a collector. It is the work of lists, of ledgers, of insurance values and shipping manifests. But for Catherine, it is a form of meditation. It is how she settles her mind after a day of war and politics. American listeners can appreciate the self-curation of Catherine. The way she used art to prove that Russia was not a barbaric wilderness, but the cultural center of the world. She was building a museum, but she was also building a fortress for her own spirit. Can you hear the rhythmic dripping of the rain against the palace windows? Plink, plink, plink. It is a lonely sound, but inside the hermitage, it is a cozy sound. The walls are thick. The art is safe. Catherine walks to the loggia of Raphael, an exact copy of the Vatican's famous gallery. She commissioned artists to go to Rome and copy every single fresco by hand. Think of the years of boring labor that went into those copies. Thousands of hours of painting on scaffolding, in the dim light of Italian churches. Now, it is all here, in St. Petersburg. She looks up at the ceiling. The patterns are intricate, rhythmic, repeating. Vines, flowers, mythical beasts, all intertwined in a dance of color. Her mind follows the lines, up and down, around and around, until she feels a sense of perfect, quiet peace. The hermitage is a clock that has stopped. There is no time here. There is only the eternal present of the canvas. Your breathing should be very, very slow now. Like the slow, steady settling of dust on a forgotten frame. Every word is a step deeper into the dark, quiet corners of the gallery. You are drifting past the Rembrandts, past the statues, and into the soft, velvet shadows. The candles in the hermitage are being extinguished now. One by one. Puff, puff, puff. The smell of the smoke lingers for a moment, then vanishes. The gallery is dark. The paintings are still there, but they have closed their eyes for the night. The mice are scuttling in the walls, a tiny, rhythmic, scratching sound. The Empress has finished her rounds. She has locked the door. The beauty is safe. The world is at rest. The hermitage is silent. Let the rhythmic, steady, quiet pulse of the art guide you into your sleep. A low, humming, peaceful vibration that requires no thought. The colors are fading into gray. The shapes are losing their edges. And you are perfectly still. Sleep. Sleep. The echoes of the silent hermitage galleries are fading behind us now, and we are returning to the private, candlelit apartments of the aging Empress. The year is 1789. The seasons of Catherine's life are shifting, moving from the vibrant, scorching summer of Potemkin to the mellow, amber-toned autumn of her later years. This is the chapter of the later favorites. This is not a story of scandals, but a story of a system, a ritual, and the quiet, almost desperate search for human comfort in the high, cold twilight of absolute power. Imagine the sound of a heavy silk gown dragging softly across a thick, hand-woven wool rug. Shush, shush, shush. This is the sound of Catherine walking through her private rooms in the dead of night. She is older now, her step is a little slower, her mind more weary of the world's constant, clashing noise. She has created a world within a world, a system of favorites that is as organized, as disciplined, and as boring as her library. For an American listener, the idea of the later favorites is often misunderstood as a series of wild affairs. But in our boring history, we see it as an administrative ritual of the soul. Imagine the boring and meticulous process of selection. Each candidate for the Empress's favor had to be vetted, tested, and approved by Potemkin himself, even after their romantic bond had shifted into a political one. He was the grand gatekeeper. He wanted to ensure that the men who shared her private table and her bed would be loyal to her, and ultimately loyal to him. Can you hear the quiet, rhythmic ticking of the porcelain clock on her nightstand? Tick, tock, tick, tock. Life in the palace for a favorite was a gilded, repetitive routine. They were given an apartment directly below the Empress's suite, connected by a private, narrow, and dimly lit staircase. Imagine the sound of those wooden stairs creaking under a soft, hesitant footstep at midnight. It was a secret world of whispered conversations, shared tea, and the slow turning of pages. Enter Alexander Lanskoy. Of all the later men who walked those stairs, he was the one she truly, deeply cherished. He was young, beautiful, and possessed a mind that was genuinely curious about the things she loved. Think of the boring details of their time together. They did not spend their days in wild, loud parties. They spent them cataloging her vast gem collection. Imagine the feel of the cold, carved stones in the palm of your hand. Amethyst, carnelian, jasper, and onyx. Catherine and Lanskoy would sit for hours under a heavy magnifying glass, examining the tiny, rhythmic carvings of ancient Greek heroes and forgotten gods. The room would be perfectly silent, save for the sound of their steady breathing and the occasional, sharp clink of the stones hitting the velvet-lined tray. In these stones, I find the order I seek for my empire, she would whisper to him in the dark. And Lanskoy would listen, nodding slowly, providing the quiet companionship that an aging woman of power so desperately needed to survive the loneliness of the throne. But the boring history of life is also the inevitable history of loss. In 1784, the young and vibrant Lanskoy fell ill and died suddenly. The silence that followed his departure was absolute and terrifying. Imagine Catherine sitting in the dark of her room, the magnifying glass still sitting on the table, the gems untouched and gathering dust. She wrote to her correspondent Grimm, "I am a soul in pain. I am a void." After Lanskoy came others, a rotation of men designed to fill the silence. Yermolov, Mamonov, and eventually, the final favorite, Platon Zubov. For each of them, the ritual remained exactly the same, as if it were a law of the state. They were given a starting gift of 100,000 rubles, they were given a title, and they were given a specific role in the grand theater of the Russian court. Imagine the sound of the gold coins being counted out in the imperial treasury. A sharp, metallic, rhythmic clink, clink, clink. Each man was a piece of the architecture of her daily life. They were her pupils. She taught them history, she taught them how to behave in the French-style salons, she molded them into the men she wanted them to be, as if she were sculpting them out of clay. For an American audience, this is like a high-stakes mentorship, a strange, imperial form of life coaching. Catherine was a teacher at heart, and she used her favorites as the canvas for her ideas of European refinement. Can you hear the sound of the harpsichord playing in the evening? A soft, rhythmic, tinkling sound that floats through the long, empty palace halls. Catherine would sit with her favorite of the moment, playing card games, or simply watching the snow fall against the thick glass of the window. The music was merely the background to the boring and heavy reality of aging power. As the years went by, the men became younger and younger, and Catherine's psychological dependence on them became deeper and more profound. She was holding on to the first spark of her vanished youth. She was trying to outrun the long, cold shadows of the coming night. Platon Zubov was the last of the line. He was 22 and she was 60. He was ambitious, dark, and manipulative. The court whispered behind their hands that he was a little king. Imagine him walking through the palace, his silver spurs jingling with a rhythmic, arrogant sound. Jingle clink, jingle clink. Catherine knew in her heart he was not Potemkin. She knew he was not her beloved Lanskoy. But she was tired. She needed the simple comfort of a warm room, a familiar face, and the illusion of being loved. The boring truth is that even an empress, who rules millions, just wants to be cared for at the end of the day. She would look in her hand mirror, the silver surface slightly tarnished at the edges. She saw the deep wrinkles, the gray hair pulled back, the heavy, tired eyes of a woman who had ruled for over 30 years. And then, she would turn to Zubov, and he would tell her she was still the rising sun of Russia. It was a rhythmic, necessary lie that they both played out every night. Your breathing should be very, very slow now. Like the slow, steady ticking of a clock in a room where everyone else has gone to bed. Every word I speak is a wave carrying you deeper into the quiet, autumn nights of the palace. You are drifting past the gems, past the harpsichord music, and into the soft, velvet pillows of the Empress's bed. The favorites have come and they have gone. The titles have been signed and the wax has cooled. The money has been spent and the memories have faded. But the woman, the human soul behind the title, remains. Imagine the Winter Palace at 2 a.m. The guards stand as still as statues. The candles are burnt down to the wick. Catherine is sleeping, her hand resting on a book of ancient philosophy. The ritual of the day is over. The ritual of the night has finally begun. Let the rhythmic, steady, quiet pulse of the history guide you into your final rest. A low, humming, peaceful vibration that requires no thought and no effort. The men are just passing shadows on the wall. The Empress is a soul in search of peace. And the Empire is finally quiet. Sleep. Sleep. The mirrors are dark now. The dreams are beginning to take shape. Step softly now, as we leave the rhythmic rotation of the court favorites and enter a room that has been locked from the inside. The year is 1784. The vibrant, intellectual summer of the palace has suddenly been replaced by a premature and permanent winter. Alexander Lanskoy, the young man who was Catherine's pupil, her companion, and the one she called her dearest friend, is gone. This is the chapter of the Great Grief. A story of a silence so profound that it brought an empire to a standstill. Imagine the smell of a room that has not been opened for days. It smells of cold lilies, stale incense, and the lingering, sweet scent of a young man's cologne. Catherine is not at her desk today. For the first time in 22 years, the 5 a.m. coffee has not been brewed. The quills remain dry in their holders. The ink has formed a thick, black crust in the well. The boring history of grief is not about tears or shouting. It is about the absence of movement. Imagine Catherine sitting on a low sofa in a darkened room. The heavy velvet curtains are drawn tight against the bright July sun, because the light feels like an insult. She is wrapped in a black silk shawl that feels like lead on her shoulders. She does not move. She does not speak. She simply watches the dust motes dancing in the one sliver of light that has escaped through the drapes. Can you hear the absolute silence of the Winter Palace? The guards outside her door are standing so still they have become part of the architecture. They do not whisper. They do not shift their weight. The entire machinery of the Russian Empire has slowed to a crawl, waiting for the heart of the Empress to beat again. American listeners understand the weight of a loss that stops time. For Catherine, Lanskoy was not just a lover, he was the person who made the weight of the crown feel like it wasn't there. With him, she could be a woman who collected gems and read French poetry. Without him, she is just an aging empress in an empty room. Imagine the small portrait of him that sits on her nightstand. It is framed in gold and pearls. She looks at his painted eyes, eyes that will never age, eyes that will never look at her with the fear or greed that she sees in everyone else. She reaches out to touch the glass. It is cold. Rhythmic, steady, cold. Think of the boring details of her morning rituals. She refused to see her ministers. She refused to sign the daily decrees. Potemkin, her partner in all things, had to rush back to St. Petersburg. Imagine the sound of his heavy, worried footsteps in the hallway. Thump, thump, thump. He stops at her door. He listens to the silence. He knows that even he cannot fix this. She is a soul in pieces, he writes to a friend. Catherine spends her nights walking through the rooms Lanskoy lived in. Imagine the sound of her slippers on the parquet floor. Shush, shush, shush. A slow, rhythmic wandering through the geography of a ghost. She touches his books. She touches his writing desk. She finds a scrap of paper where he had been practicing his French grammar. The ink is still there, but the hand that moved the pen is gone. She sits at his desk and tries to write, but her hand shakes. She manages to write a single letter to her friend, the diplomat Grimm. I am a void, she writes. I am a person who has lost her voice. Think of the effort it took to write those few words. The sound of the quill scratching against the paper in a room where no one else is breathing. Scritch, scritch, scritch. As you lie there, imagine that void. It is a quiet, dark space. It is not a place of pain, but a place of nothingness. Every word I speak is a soft light in that darkness, guiding you through the hallways of her memory. The weeks turn into months. The boring work of the empire begins to pile up. Petitions go unanswered. War plans gather dust. The court whispers that the Empress has lost her mind to sorrow. But Catherine is not losing her mind. She is simply enduring. She is learning the rhythm of a broken heart. Can you hear the rhythmic dripping of the summer rain on the palace roof? Plink, plink, plink. It sounds like the ticking of a clock that is moving too slowly. Catherine listens to it for hours. Eventually, the weight of the crown begins to pull her back. She realizes that she cannot be a woman in mourning forever. She must be an empress in mourning. She orders a monument to be built for him in the park at Tsarskoye Selo. A white marble column, simple and elegant. Imagine the sound of the stone cutters working in the distance. A rhythmic, steady clink, clink, clink. She begins to dress in colors again, but the colors are muted. Gray, mauve, deep purple. She returns to her 5 a.m. coffee. She returns to her desk. But she leaves Lanscoy's rooms exactly as they were. The dust begins to settle on his magnifying glass. The air becomes still around his books. The grief for Lanscoy becomes a permanent part of her architecture. It is a room in her heart that she never fully leaves. Your breathing should be very, very slow now. Like the slow, steady settling of snow on a grave. Every word is a wave of peace, washing away the sharp edges of the day. You are drifting through the park at Tsarskoye Selo, past the white marble column, and into the soft, green shadows of the trees. The palace is quiet tonight. The grief has become a memory. The memory has become a part of the stone. Catherine is sleeping now. She is dreaming of a library where the sun is always shining, and where a young man is waiting for her with a new gem to examine. There is no pain in the dream. There is only the order and the beauty they shared. Let the rhythmic, steady, quiet pulse of the history guide you into your rest. A low, humming, peaceful vibration that carries no weight. The crown is on the table. The portrait is in the dark. And the Empress is at rest. Sleep. Sleep. The room is locked. But the soul is free. Allow your mind to drift away from the heavy, shadowed rooms of morning, and into a space that is bright, intellectual, and filled with the crisp scent of fresh paper. The year is 1790. While the world outside is changing, and the air in France is growing thick with revolution, inside Catherine's private study, a different kind of fire is burning. This is the chapter of the Enlightenment correspondence. A story of a romance that never required a touch, a love affair of the mind that spanned thousands of miles and decades of time. Imagine the sound of a letter being opened. A sharp, crisp, rhythmic crinkle of heavy, expensive parchment. This is the sound of Catherine's connection to the greatest minds of her age. Voltaire, Diderot, d'Alembert. To the world, she was the autocrat of the North. But to them, she was the star of the North. For an American listener, this is the original long-distance relationship. A bond built entirely on words. In our boring history, we look at the physical reality of these letters. Imagine the paper. It is thick, handmade, with a slightly rough texture that catches the light. Catherine would sit at her desk, the one we know so well now, and she would prepare her tools. Can you hear the rhythmic sound of her knife sharpening the quill? Scrape, scrape, scrape. She needed the point to be perfect, because she was writing to the man who defined the century, Voltaire. She dips the pen into the inkwell. The ink is a deep, obsidian black, smelling of iron and vinegar. As she writes, the only sound in the room is the rhythmic scritch, scritch, scritch of the nib against the page. Think of the journey a letter took in the 1700s. Once Catherine finished writing, she would melt the red sealing wax over a small flame. Imagine the smell of the burning wax, sweet and smoky. She presses her imperial seal into the soft, warm pool. Press, hold, release. The wax hardens into a solid, rhythmic symbol of her authority. Then, the wait begins. The letter is placed in a leather satchel. It is handed to a courier. Imagine the sound of the horse's hooves as it leaves St. Petersburg. Gallop, gallop, gallop. The letter travels across the vast, empty plains of Russia, through the dark forests of Prussia, over the mountains, and finally, into the quiet, sun-drenched gardens of Ferney, where Voltaire sits waiting. It could take weeks. It could take months. This is the boring history of patience. The rhythm of a conversation that moves at the speed of a horse. Voltaire called her his catechism. He wrote to her about the philosophy of the heart and the rule of reason. Imagine him reading her letters aloud to his friends. His voice is thin and shaky, but his mind is as sharp as a razor. She is the only one who truly understands, he whispers. Catherine used these letters as a form of intellectual rest. In the middle of a war with the Turks, or a revolt in the provinces, she would retreat to her desk to talk to her master. She told him about her laws. She told him about the climate of Russia. She even joked with him about her own mistakes. "I am a glutton for your words," she wrote. As you lie there, imagine her library. Thousands of books, many of them gifts from the men she wrote to. The room is silent, but it is filled with the voices of 1,000 thinkers. Catherine walks the rows, her fingers brushing the leather spines. A rhythmic, steady, calming touch. She isn't just a queen, she is a librarian of human progress. When Diderot, the great editor of the encyclopedia, fell into poverty, Catherine didn't just send him money. She did something far more boring and brilliant. She bought his entire library, then hired him as her personal librarian to look after it, allowing him to keep the books in his own house in Paris. Think of the kindness in that detail. A rhythmic, quiet, intellectual generosity. When he finally traveled to St. Petersburg to thank her, they sat together for hours every afternoon. Imagine them in a small drawing room. Diderot was so excited by their conversations that he would often lean forward and slap her knee to emphasize a point. Catherine just laughed. She enjoyed the friction of a mind that didn't bow to her. "He is a man of 100,000 ideas," she said. "Can you hear the sound of the fireplace in that room? The rhythmic pop and crackle of the cedar logs. The low, steady hum of their voices. It is a music of the intellect." But as the years passed, the Enlightenment began to face a darker reality. The French Revolution broke out. The ideas of reason were being used to fuel the guillotine. Catherine watched from the north, and her letters changed tone. They became more cautious, more rhythmic in their defense of order. She was a philosopher, but she was also a sovereign. When Voltaire died, she was devastated. She felt as if a light had gone out in the world. She bought his entire library, nearly 7,000 volumes, and had them shipped to the Hermitage. Imagine the sound of those crates being opened. The same sound we heard with the art, but this time, the treasure was made of paper and ink. "His books are the architecture of my mind," she said. "Your breathing should be very, very slow now. Like the slow, steady drying of ink on a page. Every word I speak is a letter from the past, a message of peace and reason sent across the centuries to you. You are drifting through the library, past the rows of Voltaire, past the maps of Diderot, and into the soft, silent wisdom of the ages. The quills have all been laid down. The inkwells are dry. The couriers have all gone home. But the thoughts, the correspondence of the light, remain." Imagine Catherine sitting at her desk one last time tonight. She isn't writing. She is just holding a letter. The paper is old, slightly yellowed, smelling of a garden in France that she will never see. She smiles, a quiet, intellectual, satisfied smile. She has ruled an empire, but she has also mastered the mind. Let the rhythmic, steady, quiet pulse of the history guide you into your rest. A low, humming, peaceful vibration that requires no effort. The library is dark. The thinkers are sleeping. And the Empress is content. Sleep. Sleep. The letters are closed. The dreams are beginning. Close your eyes now, and let the intellectual brightness of the Enlightenment correspondence fade into a soft, amber twilight. We are entering the final rooms of the palace, where the air is thick with the scent of heavy perfumes, expensive tobacco, and the quiet, rhythmic ticking of 1,000 clocks. The year is 1791. Potemkin, her titan, her partner, has passed away in the southern steppes, and the Empress is truly, for the first time in decades, a woman alone on a very high peak. This is the chapter of Platon Zubov, the final favorite. The man who would stand at the edge of her life as the sun began its final, slow descent. Imagine the sound of a young man's silver spurs clicking against the marble floors of the Winter Palace. Click clink, click clink. This is the sound of Platon Zubov. He is 22 years old, and Catherine is 62. To an American listener, this might seem like a story of scandal, but in our boring history, we see it as a story of the fear of the dark. Catherine is not just looking for a lover, she is looking for a reflection of the strength she used to feel. Imagine Platon entering her private suite. He is handsome in a cold, sharp-edged way. He does not have the warmth of Saltykov or the genius of Potemkin. He is a creature of ambition. But Catherine, she sees him through the soft, hazy lens of her own aging eyes. She calls him her child, her little blackie, her pupil. For her, he is a rhythmic distraction from the growing aches in her legs and the weight of the crown on her tired brow. Can you hear the sound of her daily ritual with Zubov? Every morning, at the hour when she used to write to philosophers, she now spends time teaching Platon the art of statecraft. Imagine them sitting at a table covered in green velvet. There are maps spread out, maps of Poland, maps of Persia. Catherine points with a trembling finger, her voice low and steady. This is where the border must be, she whispers. This is the boring history of her final years. The slow, repetitive work of trying to hand over 30 years of wisdom to a young man who is more interested in his own reflection. She pours her energy into him as if she could pour her own life into his veins. Imagine the sound of her quill as she signs the decrees he puts before her. Scritch, scritch, scritch. She is giving him power, bit by bit, until he becomes a little czar in his own right. Platon's influence is everywhere. He lives in the apartments directly below hers. He has his own court of sycophants who follow him like a rhythmic, murmuring tide. Imagine the atmosphere of his rooms. It is the opposite of Catherine's library. It is loud, it is frantic, it is filled with the smell of strong wine and the sound of gambling. But when he enters her presence, he becomes the perfect, attentive companion. He brings her gifts. A small, rhythmic, clockwork bird that sings a French melody. Imagine the sound of the gears turning inside the bird. Whir, click, whir. Catherine watches it for hours, her head tilted to the side, her eyes lost in the music. The bird doesn't age. The bird doesn't die. It just sings its song over and over, a rhythmic loop of a vanished world. American history often talks about the twilight of the gods. Catherine was in her twilight. Her legs are swollen. She finds it difficult to walk the long galleries of the Hermitage. Imagine the sound of her heavy, rhythmic breathing as she climbs the stairs. She leans on Platon's arm. He is her crutch. He is her support. And in her mind, he is her love. Think of the boring details of their quiet evenings. They are not grand balls anymore. They are small games of cards. The sound of the cards being shuffled. A soft, rhythmic thwip thwip thwip. The sound of the cards being laid on the table. Catherine loses on purpose, just to see him smile. She is a woman who has defeated empires, but she is losing a game of cards to a boy. The power of Zubov grew as the health of the Empress faded. He took over the correspondence. He handled the ministers. He was the wall between her and the world. Sometimes, she would look at him and see the shadows of the men who came before. The strength of Orlov, the mind of Potemkin. But then the light would change, and she would see only Platon, and the reality of the end. He is my comfort, she would write in her journal. He makes the night less cold. As you lie there, imagine that night. The Winter Palace is a fortress of shadow. The Neva is frozen solid once again. The wind is whistling through the cracks in the window frames, a low, rhythmic, mournful sound. Inside, the fire is burning low. Catherine is sitting in her chair, her eyes closed, listening to the rhythmic ticking of the bird. Zubov is there, sitting at her feet. He is playing with the rings on her fingers. The rings that symbolize her rule over millions. He is waiting for her to sleep. Your breathing should be very, very slow now. Like the slow, steady pulsing of the fire in the hearth. Every word I speak is a step toward the edge of the story. You are drifting through the final hallways, past the green velvet tables, past the clockwork birds, and into the soft, heavy silence of the end. The quills are being laid down for the final time. The maps are being rolled up. The cards are being put back in their box. The favorite is waiting. The Empress is tired. Imagine the palace at midnight. The guards are changing one last time. Their boots make a rhythmic, muffled sound on the snow outside. Thump, thump, thump. Inside, the candles have almost all gone out. There is only the smell of the smoke and the feeling of the cold coming in from the river. The final favorite is the last face she will see in the light. Let the rhythmic, steady, quiet pulse of the history guide you into your rest. A low, humming, peaceful vibration that marks the passage of an era. The boy is quiet. The Empress is dreaming. And the empire is holding its breath. Sleep. Sleep. The sun has set. The night is here. We are entering the year 1796. The air is thin and cold, smelling of the first frost and the ancient dust of the Romanov archives. Catherine is 67 years old. In an era when most did not see their 50th year, she has stood as the pillar of the East for 34 years. This is the chapter of the evening. A story of a woman who is no longer running toward the future, but is quietly, rhythmically, folding the silks of her legacy. Imagine the sound of a heavy, silver-tipped cane striking the parquet floor. Tap, pause, tap, pause. This is the rhythm of her final months. Her legs, once capable of riding astride a horse into a coup, are now swollen and heavy. She walks slowly through the hermitage, no longer looking for new art to buy, but visiting the paintings like old, silent friends. For an American listener, This is the quiet dignity of a life well lived. The boring reality of aging in a palace. Catherine's daily routine has become even more precise, even more rhythmic. She still rises at 5 a.m., but the coffee is now a comfort rather than a fuel. She sits by the window and watches the sun rise over the Neva River, a pale, golden disk struggling against the gray mist. She watches the ice floes move slowly down the river, a rhythmic, crushing, grinding sound that only she can hear in the silence of the dawn. The work at her desk has changed. She is no longer writing laws to change the world, she is writing her memoirs. Imagine the sound of the quill on the page. Scritch, scritch, scritch. She is trying to explain herself to history. I was a German girl who became a Russian soul, she writes. She pauses, dipping the pen into the ink. The ink is thick and dark, like the shadows in the corners of the room. Think of the boring details of her domestic peace. Her greatest joy now is her grandsons, Alexander and Constantine. Imagine them in her private drawing room in the evenings. The floor is covered in a soft, Aubusson rug. The boys are playing on the floor with wooden blocks, building the cities their grandmother has already built in stone. Catherine watches them from her high-backed chair, a small, rhythmic smile on her face. She is obsessed with their education. She writes their textbooks herself. The grandmother's ABCs. Imagine the sound of her reading to them in the twilight. Her voice is a low, steady, comforting hum. She is teaching them about the Greek project, about the law, and about the weight of the crown they will one day wear. You must be a person before you are a king, she tells Alexander. He looks up at her with his bright, blue eyes, the same eyes as her own. Can you hear the rhythmic crackle of the fire in the hearth? Pop. Hiss. Crackle. The heat is intense, but the room still feels the chill of the coming winter. Catherine pulls a shawl of Orenburg lace around her shoulders. It is as light as a spider web, but as warm as a summer memory. She leans her head back and closes her eyes. In these final months, she spends hours in the boring task of sorting through her letters. Thousands of letters from Voltaire, from Potemkin, from her mother in Germany. She burns some, she keeps others. Imagine the sound of the paper being tossed into the flames. A soft, rhythmic whoosh as the words turn into gray ash. She is tidying her life, clearing the path for the boy who will succeed her. She is worried about her son, Paul. She sees his anger, his resentment, his rhythmic obsession with the Prussian ways of her late husband. She dreams of bypassing him, of giving the throne directly to Alexander. This is her final coup, a revolution of the pen. Imagine her drafting the decree, the paper trembling slightly in her hand. The American audience understands the desire to protect a legacy, to ensure that what was built with blood and intellect does not crumble in the next generation. Catherine was a grandmother fighting for the future of an empire. Think of the architecture of her final days. She spent much of her time at the Catherine Palace in Tsarskoye Selo. Imagine the amber room. A room where the walls are made entirely of amber, glowing in the candlelight like a sunset trapped in stone. As she walks through it, the light reflects off her face, smoothing away the wrinkles, making her look for a moment like the girl who arrived in 1744. The boring details of the amber room are hypnotic. The way the honey-colored stone smells when it is warmed by the room. The tiny, rhythmic inclusions of prehistoric insects trapped in the resin millions of years ago. Catherine touches a panel. It is smooth, warm, and timeless. Just like her. She begins to have premonitions. She sees a white lady in the corridors of the palace, a ghost that only appears to the Romanovs before the end. She doesn't feel fear. She feels a rhythmic, steady acceptance. The evening has come, she says to her maid. Your breathing should be very, very slow now. Like the slow, steady ticking of a clock that is nearly unwound. Every word I speak is a leaf falling from the tree of history, drifting down, down, onto the quiet, snow-covered ground of the past. You are drifting through the amber room, past the grandsons at play, and into the soft, purple shadows of the winter twilight. The quills are all dry now. The memoirs are finished. The decree is written, but not yet signed. The Empress is sitting in her chair, looking out at the park. The trees are bare, their branches like black lace against the gray sky. Imagine the silence of the park. The only sound is the rhythmic, distant, hollow sound of an axe in the woods. A tree is being felled. The evening is here. The work is done. The legacy is set. Catherine closes her eyes. She isn't sleeping yet, she is just listening to the rhythm of her own heart. A slow, steady, faithful beat that has carried her from a minor German house to the throne of the largest empire on earth. Let the rhythmic, steady, quiet pulse of the history guide you into your final rest. A low, humming, peaceful vibration that fills the entire palace. The grandsons are in bed. The favorite is waiting in the hall. And the Empress is at home in the evening of her soul. Sleep. Sleep. The sun has gone down. The stars are coming out over Russia. The evening has finally passed, and we are entering the deepest, most quiet hour of the night. The year is 1796. November has arrived in St. Petersburg, bringing with it a damp, bone-chilling mist that clings to the marble statues and turns the Neva River into a dark, mirror-like void. Inside the Winter Palace, the frantic energy of 34 years of rule has suddenly, rhythmically, come to a halt. This is the final chapter. The silence of the marble. The story of how a woman became a myth, and how an empress returned to the earth. Imagine the sound of a single, heavy candle being snuffed out in a vast room. Puff, sizzle, silence. On the morning of November 6th, the rhythmic routine of the palace was broken. The 5 a.m. coffee was prepared, but the Empress did not appear. For the first time, the desk remained empty. The quills remained silent. Inside her private dressing room, Catherine had fallen. A stroke, a sudden, heavy blow from the hand of time. Imagine the sound of the courtiers' footsteps as they discover her. No longer the rhythmic, confident walk of diplomats, but a frantic, uneven scurrying. Pitter-patter, shuffle, stop. They carry her to a mattress placed on the floor, because the Empress of all the Russias is now too heavy, too real, for her gilded bed. For an American listener, there is a profound, boring peace in this transition. The realization that even the most powerful person in the world eventually meets the same quiet end as the humblest peasant. For 36 hours, she lay there, her breathing a slow, rhythmic, struggling rasp. In and out. In and out. The court gathered around her in a heavy, suffocating silence. Can you hear the sound of the priests chanting? It is a low, vibrating, constant hum. They are reciting the prayers for the dying. The smell of incense is everywhere, thick and sweet, clouding the vision of those who watch. In the final hour, the room grew perfectly still. The rasping breath slowed, caught, and then stopped. The great Catherine was no more. The boring rituals of an imperial funeral are a study in rhythmic repetition. Imagine the dressing of the body. No longer the silk gowns of the ball, but a shroud of silver brocade. Her crown is placed on a velvet cushion at her feet. The palace is draped in black. Thousands of yards of heavy black crepe cover the mirrors, the windows, even the golden frames of the Rembrandts. The world has lost its color. Think of the procession to the Peter and Paul Cathedral. It is a slow, rhythmic, funereal march. Imagine the sound of the muffled drums. Boom, thud, boom, thud. Thousands of soldiers move in perfect, silent synchronicity. The horses' hooves are muffled by the fresh snow. The only other sound is the tolling of the great bells of the city. A deep, sonorous, vibrating dong. Pause. Dong. Catherine's coffin is made of heavy oak, lined with lead. It is a fortress for her final rest. As they carry her into the cathedral, the air is cold, smelling of stone and old incense. Her son, the new Tsar Paul, performs a strange, rhythmic act of reconciliation. He has the body of his father, Peter III, exhumed and brought to the cathedral. He places a crown on the coffin of the father who never ruled, and a crown on the mother who ruled for both of them. In death, the marriage that was a shadow for 30 years is finally made whole in the silence of the stone. They are buried side by side. Imagine the sound of the marble slab being slid into place over the vault. A long, heavy, rhythmic grind of stone against stone. And then, the click as it settles into the earth. Snick. The American audience understands the value of a monument, a place where history becomes solid. But for Catherine, the monument was not the marble. It was the empire she left behind. The cathedral is silent now. The mourners have all gone home. The black crepe has been taken down from the palace windows. The city of St. Petersburg continues to breathe, its life a rhythmic, steady pulse of commerce and cold. As you lie there, imagine the Peter and Paul Cathedral at midnight. The golden spire reaches up into the dark, snowy sky like a needle. Inside, the white marble sarcophagi of the Tsars stand in long, silent rows. Catherine's tomb is simple. White marble. No carvings of battles. No lists of titles. Just her name. If you listen very closely, in the silence of the marble, you can still hear the rhythm of her life. The scratch of the quill. The creak of the carriage wheels. The lapping of the Black Sea waves. The low murmur of a conversation with Voltaire. The history is not dead. It is just resting. Your breathing should be as slow as the heartbeat of the stone now. Every word I have spoken over these 3 hours has been a step leading you to this moment of perfect, absolute quiet. You have traveled from Germany to the throne, from the loneliness of the palace to the glory of the South. And now, you have reached the end of the road. The story is over. The book is closed. The candle has burned down to nothing. Let the rhythmic, steady, eternal silence of the marble guide you into the deepest, most restorative sleep of your life. A low, humming, peaceful vibration that carries you into the forever. The Empress is at rest. The Empire is secure. And you are home. Sleep. Sleep. The stars are silent over Russia. The marble is cold. And the dream is eternal. Good night.